My name is Michelle, and I work in an office. I'm 31 years old, and my husband John is 33. We actually met through a friend's introduction, and now we've been married for 2 years. When I was growing up, I was pretty sheltered, being an only child. I went to a regular public school until middle school, but then I switched to an all-girls private school until college. You know how it is with all-girls schools. There's a lot of admiration among friends, but I never really thought about dating guys seriously. Sure, I went out with a couple of guys in my early 20s, but nothing really clicked for marriage. I always figured I'd meet someone eventually, but time flew by, and suddenly I was in my 30s. My parents started getting worried, especially my dad. He started suggesting I meet some guys he found on matchmaking websites, and one of those guys turned out to be John, my husband now. After we met a few times, John told me he had feelings for me. He's a really kind person who respects his parents a lot. I'm the same way, so I felt like we shared important values. That's why I decided to marry him. Our wedding was organized pretty quickly, and our families and friends were all there to support us. I was thrilled and hoped that our happiness would last forever. But not long after we got married, John's dad got sick and passed away. John started spending a lot of time taking care of his mom, which is totally understandable. He's always visiting her and even goes on trips with her. While he still cares about me, it sometimes feels like his mom comes first in everything. It's a bit frustrating, but other than that, things are okay. I guess this is just how marriage is, so I've learned to accept it and make compromises. Lately, I've been finding a lot of happiness in entering sweepstakes and winning prizes. It's been mostly little things like makeup and snacks. But then I hit the jackpot, a pair of tickets to Miami. I couldn't believe it when I got the call. It was the first time I ever won something so big. But then came the tough part, deciding who to take. John had just gone on a trip with his mom, and he usually pays for his own travels. So I thought, why not give this amazing opportunity to my parents? I hurried over to their house and shared the news. Guess what? I won a trip to Miami. Why don't you two go? My mom was ecstatic, saying it had been ages since they'd gone on a trip abroad. However, my dad didn't seem as excited about the trip. I've got work commitments, Michelle, he explained. But you still have some paid leave left, don't you? I countered. True, but this is a busy season for our industry, especially for me as the department head. Taking time off isn't easy. My mom then suggested, Michelle, if you can manage to get leave, why don't you and I go? I thought about it and agreed. You're right, Mom. It's too good of an opportunity to miss. Since my dad couldn't make it, I decided to ask my boss for time off the next day. Thankfully, work was slow, and I got permission without any trouble. After work, I swung by a bookstore at the station to pick up a guidebook on Miami, filled with excitement for the trip. As I neared home, I noticed the lights were already on. John must have gotten back home already, I realized. I better hurry up with dinner, I thought to myself. As I opened the door, instead of John's shoes, I spotted a pair of women's shoes I recognized. Michelle, what's the meaning of leaving the house empty at this hour? Scolded my mother-in-law. Oh, I didn't know you were here, I responded. It doesn't matter if I'm here or not. It's time for John to be home, and you should be preparing dinner and getting things ready for him, she lectured. Living nearby, she has a spare key, courtesy of John. I understand she feels lonely since her husband passed away, but her unexpected visits and presumptions of entitlement don't sit well with me. Plus, she holds on to old-fashioned beliefs about a wife's role, and she's not a fan of me working. Every time we cross paths, she finds something to criticize or make snide remarks about, which makes it difficult for me to warm up to her. Why the long face and the detour instead of coming straight home? She continued, You're such a useless wife. Let me see what you bought, my mother-in-law demanded. Please stop, I objected, but she ignored me and grabbed the bag containing the guidebook. What's all this? What do you plan to do in Miami? How extravagant, she exclaimed. No, it's a prize I won. I'm giving it as a gift to my parents, I explained. Well, nobody told me about this, she retorted. Just as we were arguing, John walked in. I'm back. What's going on? He asked. Welcome home, John. Michelle won a trip to Miami, my mother-in-law informed him. How thoughtless of you to give it to Michelle's parents without discussing it first. I would have loved to go, John said. I didn't know about the trip to Miami either. I was thinking of giving it to my parents, I responded. How many people can go on this trip? John inquired. It's for 2 people, I replied. You should have told me beforehand. I would have loved to go too. Why are you making decisions on your own? John questioned. I thought about going with just the 2 of us. But this time, I wanted to give it to my parents, I explained. You're mistaken. This time Mom and I are going and you're staying home, John declared firmly, cutting off my protests. No way. I won this. I'm going to give it as a gift to my parents, I insisted. We can plan something else another time, right? Mom really wants to go, so please try to understand, I pleaded. What are you even saying? You just went on a trip with your mom not long ago. Why can't I use my own money to go on a trip? Anyway, this time Mom and I are going. If you don't like it, we can get a divorce, John declared, dropping the word like a bombshell. The mention of divorce from my husband, used as a threat, made me feel a sudden wave of detachment towards him. Fine, do as you please, I responded, deciding to step back. My husband and mother-in-law, oblivious to my internal turmoil, seemed pleased with themselves. You should have been more understanding from the start, they chided. Ignoring their smug remarks, I began to consider my next steps to address the situation. The following day, I sought counsel from my parents, sharing the ordeal with them. My mom, who had been excited about the trip, seemed disappointed, but she understood the situation. I understand. If that's how it is, we can't help it. It's better to avoid any tension between you 2, so don't worry, she reassured me. Feeling guilty about letting her down, I decided to make things right. During my lunch break, I called the airline and requested to change the trip to Miami to include my husband and mother-in-law instead. However, the operator explained that once the reservation is made, changes aren't allowed, and the tickets are only valid for the winner. This was clearly stated in the documents they sent me. Realizing my mistake, I told the operator I would decline the prize. I chose not to tell my husband and the others about this and decided that if they really wanted to go, they could purchase tickets themselves. That evening, when my husband came home from work, he brought up the trip. Hey Michelle, did you call the airline? Did you tell them we're going to Miami with Mom? He asked. I made the call and handed over the winning documents and tickets to my husband. Here, take a look at these. All the details are in there. It's important to read them, I urged. Knowing he probably wouldn't bother reading them, I handed them over anyway. True to form, he just glanced at them and set them on his shelf. Try to see this as a kind gesture for your mom, I suggested. Sure, I'm more than happy to stay home. I can't wait to see their reactions, he agreed. On the day of the trip, John seemed unusually tense, as if something was weighing heavily on him. As the departure day arrived, John and his mother encountered delays at the airport. What's going on? Can you explain this? He demanded, looking at me with confusion and frustration. As we've explained, these tickets are non-transferable, and if the winner isn't present, they become invalid. This is clearly outlined in our policy. Anyone else attempting to use them would need to pay the full fare. The airline representative reiterated. John and his mother had already splurged on luxury hotels, stretching their budget thin. Then, at the airport ticket counter, they encountered yet another setback. I'm terribly sorry, but there seems to be an issue. Could you please try using a different payment method? The attendant requested. That's impossible. This card has been working perfectly fine. Why is this happening now? John exclaimed in frustration. I'm afraid we can't diagnose the problem here. You may want to contact your card issuer for assistance, the attendant advised. With no other option, John had to resort to using another credit card and then reach out to me. Hey, what's happening? The tickets you gave us aren't usable, and now my credit card's been declined, he explained over the phone. Did you bother reading the fine print on the ticket? It clearly states they're invalid if the winner isn't present. And as for your credit card issue, that's news to me, I retorted. Not your card, John clarified. Well, I've reported my card lost. I couldn't find it in my wallet, so I suspected you might have taken it. Thankfully, it hasn't been misused, I explained. That's not amusing. You won't get away with this when we're back, John threatened. That's entirely your own doing. What you did amounts to theft, I countered. You know what, woman? I'm divorcing you. Get out, John declared angrily. Fine. Just as I expected you'd say. As you wish. I'll agree to the divorce, I replied calmly. Truth be told, I had already planned to leave for my parents' house before John told me to go. I had already packed my bags, using the paid leave I had taken for this trip. As I left the house, I made sure to take the passbook and seal so he couldn't access our savings. I also informed the neighbors that we would be getting divorced. Upon reviewing our savings for potential division in the event of a divorce, I discovered that the funds had been depleted multiple times. I had no recollection of making these withdrawals, indicating that John was responsible. Further investigation, comparing the withdrawal dates with my daily blog entries, revealed that the money was withdrawn during the period when John and my mother-in-law were on vacation. I confided in my parents about John's proposition for divorce, his unauthorized use of my credit card, and his utilization of our joint savings for the trip with my mother-in-law. As I recounted the situation, my parents' expressions shifted from concern to sternness. I can't believe John would stoop to such deceit. I'm deeply sorry, it's my fault for arranging your marriage, my dad apologized, bowing his head in shame. His anger towards John was evident. This falls on my shoulders. Leave it to me, he assured me, taking responsibility. In reality, my dad held a high-ranking position at the parent company of John's employer and occasionally conducted audits. Despite another colleague being originally assigned, my dad rearranged his schedule at short notice to personally audit John's company. During the audit, he invited John's superior, an executive at the subsidiary, for a meal. Given the hierarchical structure, John's superior was visibly anxious, attempting to curry favor with my dad while struggling with nerves. During the meal, my dad took the opportunity to inform John's superior about my situation. In fact, my daughter is going through a divorce. It appears that the main issues stemmed from her husband's excessive dependence on his mother. If it were just that, I might have advised her to persevere, but it seems he also misused my daughter's credit card and depleted her savings without her consent. Under such circumstances, I couldn't in good conscience recommend reconciliation. By the way, your subordinate, or rather, former son-in-law, I suppose, is John. How has his performance been lately? My dad inquired. It's a busy time, but I haven't seen him much around the office, John's superior responded. Upon learning about my impending divorce from my dad, John's superior sensed trouble and decided to look into the matter further. John, being the son-in-law of the parent company's director, was well known within the company and received some preferential treatment. However, a closer examination might reveal more about his conduct. I'll arrange for a lawyer recommended by my dad to handle the divorce proceedings. You'll receive written confirmation soon, covering matters like alimony and property division, I informed John. John assured me that he wouldn't let things slide, but it seemed that neither he nor his mother would have an easy time upon their return from Miami. Sometime after John and my mother-in-law returned from their trip to Miami, John paid a visit to my parents' house. Michelle, what's this certified mail about? I'm strapped for cash. I can't afford to pay any alimony, and this property division, it's just a marital spat. There's no need to take it this far. I've apologized, so please come back, John pleaded. What are you saying? Have you even read the contents of the certified mail? Your mother's constant mental abuse, not to mention depleting our savings and attempting to use my credit card without permission. There's no way we can reconcile, right? I countered. Please, don't say that. Since you left, it's been difficult for both Mom and me. Have you been receiving icy stares from the neighbors, or have there been issues at work? John inquired, his demeanor stiffening. I suppose I hit the nail on the head, I remarked. How did you? Well, who knows? What do you think the reason might be? If you reflect on your actions, you might understand, I replied. I can't reconcile with you, and you'll have to face the consequences. Prepare yourself. Also, please communicate through the attorney from now on. If you persist in lingering, I'll involve the security company, John warned sternly. When I mentioned involving the security company, John finally relented and left with a heavy heart. In truth, everything John had come pleading about was orchestrated by my father and me. Before returning to my parents' home, I went to our neighbors and spun a tale about being kicked out by my husband and mother-in-law after they stole the plane tickets I had won in a lottery. Drawing from my past experience in the drama club during my student years, my performance was remarkably convincing. Since my husband and mother-in-law returned from their Miami trip, rumors and gossip have swirled around them in the neighborhood. My mother-in-law was mortified to learn from a local busybody that she was being shunned because of rumors like, "You took your daughter-in-law's winning travel tickets and threw her out, didn't you?" But now, it's your turn to hear the full story. Following this incident, my father initiated an investigation at my husband's workplace. It was discovered that my husband, who happened to be the son-in-law of a department head in the parent company, had been abusing his position. He frequently took time off during busy periods to travel with his mother-in-law, habitually arrived late or left early, and was even found to be embezzling company funds. Given the severity of his actions, he was promptly dismissed from his job. The company then issued a statement to all its employees, declaring an end to the preferential treatment previously extended to family members of senior staff. Thanks to the lawyer my father hired, my divorce proceedings unfolded smoothly, and I finally obtained my official single status. The savings my husband had depleted were divided evenly based on their original amounts before his spending spree, and I received fair compensation. My detailed blog entries served as evidence of his emotional abuse, validating my experiences. Feeling liberated after getting justice against my husband and mother-in-law, I didn't want to hoard the compensation from the divorce. Instead, I decided to indulge and treat myself. Coordinating with my father's company holiday, I planned a vacation, seizing the opportunity to embark on the overseas trip I had previously missed out on. Initially undecided on our destination, we eventually settled on Miami, taking into account my mother's preferences. Together with my parents, we meticulously planned our itinerary, anticipating days filled with exploring crystal-clear seas, vibrant coral reefs, indulging in shopping, and relishing our long-overdue family vacation. Recognizing the sorrow I had caused my parents through my divorce, I was determined to make amends and create lasting memories with them. While thoughts of remarriage were far from my mind at the moment, I remained open to the possibility of finding genuine companionship in the future. Uncertain about what lies ahead, I focused on the excitement of our upcoming trip with my parents, cherishing the present happiness and looking forward to whatever the future may bring.
Hey there. I'm Clara, and I've been on a roller coaster that I used to call my marriage for the near 2 decades. I know numbers, that's my game, I'm an economist. But I'll let you in on a secret. Give me a drab room and a fresh lick of paint and I'll give you a masterpiece. That's where I really shine. Now, Tom, he's a whole different story. The guy's got brains, I'll give him that. Financial analyst, and a damn good one. We met back in college, both of us bright-eyed with textbooks in hand. Dreamt of the big family, the white picket fence, the whole shebang. Turns out, life had other plans. Docs gave us the hard truth, with me, babies just weren't going to happen. Crushed us for a while, yeah, but we bounced back, sorta. We decided, if not a house filled with kids' laughter, we'd fill it with something else, style, charm, call it what you will. We found this house, and signed up for a multi-year mortgage. A beast of a place, years upon years on its bones, creaking like an old ship. Most would have walked away, but not us, we saw what it could be. I remember walking through the door the first time, the smell of dust and forgotten times in the air. Tom was right alongside me, and he was talking big plans, like he did. You see this, Clara? This place is ours. A bit of elbow grease, and we'll make it into something. I laughed, shaking my head at his excitement. Elbow grease? Tom, this place will take more than that. But we'll do it. Room by room. The first couple of years were rough. Juggling jobs and paintbrushes, learning how to fix a pipe without flooding the kitchen. But every evening, we sat amid the chaos of renovation, beers in hand, and it felt like we were invincible. One night, in the middle of an argument about what color the living room should be, he wanted blue, I wanted green, he threw his hands up and cussed. Damn it, Clara, pick whichever. It's just a color. I shot back, just a color? Tom, this is important. It sets the whole mood of the house. I was half mad, half laughing, because who gets into a tiff over paint? The green one, by the way. He said it made my eyes look brighter, and that was that. Every choice, every little victory was ours. Then the house started taking shape, and I got a taste for it, really got a taste for it. The neighbors, friends, they couldn't stop yapping about how I turned the old wreck into something out of a magazine. Each room was a new project, a challenge that I chewed on until it was just right. The transformation wasn't just the house, it was me too. Here I was, sleeves rolled up, covered in paint splatters, fiercer than I ever felt pushing papers at my old economics gig. "Holy mackerel, Clara, did you redo the bathroom again?" Tom asked one evening, eyebrows raised higher than the new shower head. "Yep, didn't like the first tiles we picked. These are better, see?" I slapped the wall, proud as hell. He leaned in, squinting at the tiles. "Looks the same to me, but if it makes you happy, then I'm all for it." Typical Tom, always played it cool, but I knew he was impressed. When the Lewis family from next door came over for dinner, Mrs. Lewis almost dropped her casserole walking into the dining room. I had to stifle a laugh. "I'm sorry, Clara, but this is just... It's gorgeous. You did this?" She was all wide-eyed, turning in circles, taking it all in. I shrugged, trying to act like it was no big deal, but inside I was buzzing. "Yeah, I did. Got sick of the wallpaper and thought I'd try something new." "New? This is a dang masterpiece," Mr. Lewis chimed in, his face all grins. "That's it, I'm done with beige," Mrs. Lewis declared, like she was about to start a revolution. The compliments were one thing, but the kicker? When people started asking if I'd take a look at their places, offer some advice. Then one lady, bless her, asked what I'd charge for a full room makeover. That's when the light bulb went off. "Tom, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make a go at this design thing full-time," I said that night, my head full of dreams and schemes. Tom looked up from his paper. "Full-time, huh? You sure you're ready for that?" I clenched my jaw but kept my cool. I've never been more sure of anything. "Well, then you better get to it. No sense in waiting around," he said, and went back to his reading. Not exactly a parade in my honor, but Tom was never one for big displays. He didn't say much while I set up shop, turned the spare bedroom into my office. He'd pass by the door, give a little nod if he caught my eye. Transformed the tangled mess of our yard into a garden people stopped to admire. I'd see him out there, leaning on the fence talking with passers-by about the flowers and the shrubs like he knew what he was talking about. One afternoon he came back inside, shaking his head. "Some guy out there just offered me $50 to talk to his wife about doing up their yard. Can you believe that?" I grinned, leaning back in my chair. We're a hot commodity, what can I say? With every chair I reupholstered and every light fixture I swapped out, my confidence surged. It was real work, getting your hands dirty, making things beautiful. And people paid for it, who would have thought? The hardest part was the learning curve, hanging drywall and not have it look like a dog's breakfast or figuring out plumbing without creating an indoor pool. But it was a good hard, you know? Satisfying. I finally felt like I was in the driver's seat of my own life, taking control and steering myself towards something that was mine and mine alone. Our house, with its fresh coat of me on every wall, every floorboard, it wasn't just a bunch of projects anymore. It was a signpost, pointing me to where I needed to go. Things were getting busier by the day, my phone was constantly buzzing with new clients, and my schedule was a jigsaw puzzle I was somehow supposed to piece together. Tom had been supportive of my work, but something had shifted lately. As my plate piled up, his seemed to empty, chores and all. "Mornin'," I greeted Tom, as I trudged into the kitchen, stepping over a pile of his work shirts. He grunted back, eyes glued to his laptop. At least he used to help with breakfast. "The basket's overflowing, Tom. Your turn, yeah?" I hinted, nudging the basket with my foot so it spilled onto the floor, hoping he'd take the hint. He sighed, not looking up. "Why? You're home all day." I stopped in my tracks. "Say what now?" "Look, you're always here," Tom continued, a little more carefully now, like he sensed the storm brewing. "Makes sense for you to handle the house stuff." "Handle the house stuff?" I repeated, my voice edged with disbelief. I'm running a business, not sitting around here twiddling my thumbs. Tom's gaze finally broke from his screen. Yeah, but I have to get to the office. I was about to argue, but the phone rang. Saved by the bell, or cursed, given it was another job to add to the pile. As the days rolled on, the pattern held. Tom's leave-behinds, coffee cups in the living room, newspapers scattered on the dining table, and those darn socks everywhere. You'd think he was trying to mark his territory. Come on, Tom, this isn't the you I know, I said one Saturday morning, dishes clanking as I loaded the dishwasher with last night's remnants. You used to care about this stuff. We were like two ships in the night, and I ain't talking about the romantic kind. He was off first thing, back when I was hip-deep in swatches and samples, and by the time he rolled back in, I was dead to the world on the couch, tablet still in hand. Listen, Tom, we can't go on like this, I said one evening, dishes done, with enough energy left over to tackle what was really bothering me. We're supposed to be a team. He looked like a teenager caught out past curfew. Look, Clara, I just don't see the problem. I laughed, but it wasn't the happy kind. You don't see? Okay. How about we start with you acting like this place is a hotel and I'm the service? He opened his mouth, then shut it, like the right words had taken a detour. I'm not asking for much. Just do your share. Act like you live here. Because, spoiler alert, you do. Tom ran a hand through his hair, looking like he wished he could disappear into the couch cushions. Fine, I'll pick up the slack. And? I pressed. And I'll start by sorting the laundry. Now we're talking. I nodded, my arms crossed, but my lips trying not to smile, because it was either that or scream. It was a small victory, but I take M where I can get M. It was a reminder that for all the work, all the late nights and color palettes and textures and fittings, if your foundation is shaky, the whole house feels it. And I wasn't just talking about the renovations. I started noticing Tom was glued to his phone more these days. Eyes almost stuck to the screen. And then there was that haircut, the kind young folks are wearing, shaved on the sides and longer on top. When I asked him about it, he just shrugged it off, saying something about wanting a change. To me, it screamed midlife crisis loud and clear. It was finally the day we'd been plowing towards for what felt like forever. The mortgage was paid off. That was supposed to be our light at the end of the tunnel, our big reason to celebrate. So, on my way back from work, I dropped by the liquor store and picked up a bottle of the good stuff, the type that would make your wallet weep. I also got fancy cheeses, the sort with names too difficult to pronounce, and those artisan crackers that Tom liked. I was all set to surprise him. Walking into the house, everything was too quiet. Usually, Tom would be home by now, dinner on the go or some music playing. Not today. The place was dead silent. I called out for him, my voice disappearing into the silence. Tom, you here? Nothing. I wasn't too worried at first. He could have stepped out for something, I thought. Maybe he went to get flowers, to add to the celebration, I hoped. I made my way to the living room and started getting the place ready for when he'd return. It was going to be a good night. We'd earned it. The expensive red would breathe a little, I'd get the snacks looking nice on plates, and we'd cheers to no more damn bank payments. But then I saw them, papers neatly stacked on the coffee table. Not thinking much of it, I reached over and that's when my heart took the first hit. Divorce papers with Tom's name already scribbled at the bottom in his unmistakable handwriting. For a good few minutes, all I could do was stand there. It felt like one of those prank shows where the joke's gone too far. But this was no joke. The realization sank its claws into me, and I could feel my hands shaking, my face hot. Damn it, Tom, what the hell is this? But I was talking to an empty house. I chucked the bottle of wine onto the couch, who cares if it stains, and sat down hard at the coffee table. This wasn't something you slip into conversation, this was a bang, it's over, out of nowhere slap in the face. I tried calling him. It just rang and rang before his voicemail casually invited me to leave a message. So I sat there for hours, waiting for him to walk through the door. I kept picking up my phone, checking if there were any missed calls, any texts. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished into thin air. The snacks lay forgotten and the bottle of red sat there, the unopened symbol of what was supposed to be our celebration. I remember when we bought this house. We thought this was it, we were set. But now there were just divorce papers and silence. And with every minute he didn't show up, didn't call, it was becoming crystal clear that he wanted out. But he couldn't even tell me to my face. Couldn't even give me a crappy excuse. Tom didn't come, and he didn't call. And I was left alone with a bunch of papers I never wanted, telling a story I didn't sign up for. When Tom walked in the next day, he wasn't alone. There she was, some young girl, looking at me like I'm yesterday's news. But this house, our house, she was eyeing it like it was hers already. "Oh, I wouldn't change a thing," she said as she flounced from room to room. "Except maybe the paint in the living room, brighten things up a bit. Don't you think it's a bit stuffy in here?" Her words, like she's marking her territory. Tom followed her like a lost puppy, then turned to me, "Brazen as you like. We will live here, Clara. In this house. With my new wife." I felt the anger boiling up inside, but I caught a look in his eyes, or maybe it was hers, and just like that, an idea sparked in my head. "Is that so?" I finally said, schooled my features into something calm, too calm. She pranced back in, still taking it all in, claiming it with her greedy little eyes. "Yes," she purred, "it'll do just fine." And then she looks at me like I'm some sort of bug under her shoe. But I'm not. I am the bug that knows where the dirt's hidden, knows exactly what to do when the time's right. I watched them, like a hawk eyeing its prey. Tom, he's talking numbers and moving dates, but I ain't listening. I'm plotting, thinking of every little way I could turn this back on them. Finally, I just smiled at them both. It wasn't a happy smile, but that's not what this was about. This was about wait and see, about holding your cards close to your chest. So I nodded. "All right then." Tom paused, probably expected me to yell or throw something. But no, I'm playing this smarter. "All right," he echoed, confused, searching my face for the catch. "Yeah, all right. You two lovebirds deserve each other." The girl beamed, clueless, thinking she's got it made. And Tom, he had this look, like maybe he's dodged a bullet. But really, he's just fired the starting gun. I turned away to hide the grin spreading across my face. They think they've won, got it all figured out. But little do they know, I've got plans of my own. The game's just begun, and I'm about to make my move. I sat across from Tom at the kitchen table, a bunch of papers spread out between us. "Let's make this quick," I said, tapping my fingers on the tabletop. "I want my $200,000, what I put into the mortgage. I'm taking my stuff, and that's that." He was half listening, his eyes drifting to where his girlfriend was hanging around like an eager puppy waiting for a treat. Yeah, sounds fair," he mumbled, not taking his gaze off her. A smile, cruel and all mine, lifted the corners of my mouth. And by my stuff, I mean everything I bought. All of it. "Sure, whatever." He was nodding along, not really caring or not realizing. Probably both. Tom's attention was all for the young thing, who was now stroking the back of the leather couch, one that I bought on a whim 3 years back because it looked classy and comfortable. We went down the inventory I'd prepared, point by point, and not once did he argue. Not when I claimed the flat-screen TV, not when I tallied up the kitchen gadgets, the high-end mixer, the chef's knives, the espresso machine that took me ages to pick out. With a distracted wave of his hand, he signed where I pointed on each paper. Signed our years away with less thought than he gave his fantasy football league. It took everything I had not to slam my fist on the table to get him to actually look at what he was giving up. But why bother? I was getting what I came for. And so, it was done. We signed our names, cleared the path for new beginnings, or in his case, a shiny new mistake. While Tom wandered out of the room, probably to chase his giggling girlfriend, I stayed put, relishing the weightlessness of ending it all. I heard her before I saw her, her voice like tinkling glass, all fake and pretty. She came into the kitchen, one-eyed, turned from a 70s nightmare into a modern foodie paradise, and she ran her fingers along the granite countertops. He never cooked a thing in his life, I thought, and she probably can't boil water. You're old, but you have good taste, she said to me, a backhanded compliment wrapped in a sweet tone that didn't reach her eyes. I looked her up and down, my gaze pointed. Honey, good taste doesn't have an expiration date. But let's see how long your novelty lasts around here. And with that, I grabbed the box filled with photo albums, my favorite coffee mug, and a collection of fridge magnets from every state I'd visited and walked out without a backward glance. I didn't need to look back to know she was still standing there, probably puzzled by my refusal to fight. Good taste indeed. Let her find out, like I did, that marble and leather mean nothing without someone real to share it with. I had my memories, my dignity, and soon enough, a bank account that would turn that house into a distant memory. Moving day had all the drama of a bad TV show. Tom just stood there, mouth hanging open, as the movers made trip after trip out the door. Couch, gone. The fancy heaters I'd haggled for, gone. And yeah, when I said everything, I meant the kitchen sink too. That was a masterpiece of stainless steel, and it was mine when I walked in. It was mine walking out. His girl, what's her face, she lost it. Standing there in designer heels on the hardwood floor, I picked out. This wasn't the deal, she hollered like she was calling the shots now. I leaned against the doorframe, every piece of paper with Tom's signature a shield. Deal was I take what's mine. That's it. Tom finally found his voice, a little wobbly but there. Clara, let's talk about this. There's gotta be. I cut him off with a wave of my hand. Talk? You signed, Tom. As clear as day. Everything I bought, I take. He ran a hand through his hair, the way he did when he realized he was in over his head. But the sink, Clara? Come on. I didn't budge. You should have read the list. Not my problem, you were too busy with her. I nodded towards his plaything, who was now scowling like a kid who'd been told Christmas was cancelled. But where are we gonna wash dishes now? She piped up, hands on her hips like she was in some sort of showdown. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Guess you'll figure it out, won't you? Tom paced now, a caged animal sort of look about him. Clara, we can't just. We need some of this stuff. How about the heaters? It's winter. I glanced at the wall where the heater used to be. Close work. Or hey, maybe you two can snuggle up for warmth. Clara, his voice cracked. Typical. Always loud when he was losing. We had an agreement, Tom. You agreed to 200 grand and for me to take my things. Well, I'm taking my things. That's fairness. That's getting what I'm owed. He went quiet, that defeated slump setting into his shoulders. His girl, she still didn't get it, feet stuck to the ground, her face twisted. This is total crap. I shrugged on my coat, the one I used to leave hanging on the hook, by the door. Your problems aren't my problems anymore, sweetie. I put on my sunglasses, grabbed my purse, and stepped out into the cold. The movers had the last few boxes ready to go, and I gave them the nod. Time to move on. Behind me, the door to the house stood open, letting out all the warmth. A pretty good metaphor, maybe, but I wasn't in the mood for poetry. I was in the mood for starting fresh. As I pulled away, I left them standing in an empty house that was once full of everything but love. Love they'd have to find on their own, without the comforts I'd brought into their lives. A month had flown by since the split, my new life slowly taking shape, when my phone buzzed with a number I knew too well. My ex, sounding all choked and lost, was on the line. I can't do this anymore, he groaned. I'm cooking, cleaning, it's all me, all day long. He told me how his young wife did squat, just flicked her thumbs on her phone screen or waltzed out with her pals. He was learning the hard way, juggling pots and pans, scrubbing toilets, and handling laundry. "Please, can we try again? I made a mistake," he was practically begging, that note in his voice like he'd never known a day's work in his life. I held the phone, a smile cracking across my face. "You've got some nerve," I chuckled into the receiver. "But you made your bed, now lie in it." Hanging up felt like dropping the heaviest bag I'd been carrying without knowing. Released from that old deadweight, I threw myself into my latest project, my very own house. Yeah, you heard that right, my house, not ours, not his, but my very own. As I stood in the entranceway, my new place was bustling with voices and footsteps. A blank canvas waiting for me to splash it with life. "Hey lady, where do you want this box?" one of the movers called out, struggling under a carton labeled kitchen stuff. "Over there, by the counter," I directed, pointing him to the spot. The advance guard of my new abode was just me and a crew who didn't care about the past, just where to lug the next heavy thing. They'd drop a box, wipe their brows and ask where the next goes. A dance of starting anew. That night, with the boxes still piled high, it hit me, this wasn't just a new page, it was a whole other book. And I was going to fill it with wonders and blunders, scribbles, and scenes that made sense only to me. It's funny how you think you need someone to make a house a home. But all you really need is to surround yourself with things that make you, well, you. Starting over? Yeah, let's paint this town with my kind of life. Hi, I'm Lily Donovan, and this is my story or whatever. My family's been a bit of a mess since forever. Got a sister, Ellie, who's sort of like the crown jewel at home because of her bad heart. Our mom, yeah, she's fixated on Ellie. With Ellie being born sickly, she got extra eyes on her, extra care. Mom was always shadowing her, making sure she was breathing okay, eating right, or was warm enough. Almost like I'm part of the furniture. Anyway, Dad was different. He was my champ. When I needed something, he was my go-to. He'd listen, not just nod along, but actually listen. Ellie, though, she got all the attention without even trying, and the drama, tons of it. Take one morning at the breakfast table for example. I was on my second cup of coffee, flipping through some job listings. Dad was at the other end, eyeing the sports section like it had the meaning of life tucked in there. Then in breezes Ellie, all theatrics, like she's about to drop some Shakespearean tragedy on us. "So, the doc says my heart's acting up again," Ellie says, all breathless and expecting a scene. Mom's up from her seat like someone lit a fire under her, asking, "What does that mean, hon? You feeling okay? You need anything?" Ellie, "Nah, I'm fine. But the vacation's off. Doctor's orders." Dad stops looking at his paper and goes, "That's rough, kiddo." Me, I'm just silent. Because what's there to say? Every little thing about Ellie's sickness tosses our family into chaos. But before I can even shrug, Mom's looking at me with those eyes. You know the type, like I've suddenly kicked a puppy by being quiet. And out of nowhere, I decide to toss in my 2 cents, maybe it's not the end of the world, right? Mom almost jumps at me. "Lily, can't you see your sister's struggling?" Ellie just slurps her juice, watching the show. I shrug. Just saying. There's worse stuff out there, ain't there? Ellie puts her glass down and says, "Nice, sis. Real supportive." Dad finally puts down the paper like he's about to referee a boxing match. "Ease up on your sister, Ellie." But Mom ain't having it. She can at least act like she cares. I push back from the table. This is the same old song and dance. I tell them straight. Look, Ellie plays sick and we all gotta dance. I'm sick of it. Literally. Ellie's eyes go all wide like she can't believe I'd say that, but come on, it's been the story of my life. Dad gets that I'm fed up and tries to smooth things over. Let's all just calm down. But I've already grabbed my jacket. Walking out, I toss over my shoulder. I'll be back when the drama's done. You can bet they had a lot to say after I left, but honestly, for once, it was nice not to hear it. Dad understood, Mom was pissed, and Ellie, well, Ellie was Ellie. That's family for you. My sights were set on college, it was my out. It wasn't just about getting away, it was about getting somewhere. Grades had been my weapon of choice, and I wielded them well. I scored a ticket to a good school, a scholarship to boot. Ellie, despite everything, made it to college too, though it was clear her path there was marked by a different set of expectations. She was out to prove something, but I still wasn't quite sure what. You gotta aim high, Lil, Dad said once as we cleared plates, his hand landing heavy and sure on my shoulder. Don't let anyone dim your lights, hear me? Yeah, Dad. I hear ya. I smiled, tucking those words close. It was the quiet fuel I needed. To soar. To escape. To be more than just Lily Donovan, sister to the kid with the weak heart, daughter to a mother with uneven scales. College was a different world. I had my nose in the books, pushing hard to make something of myself. Ellie, she just couldn't hack it. She was lost, floundering in seminars and lectures, like she was trying to read a map with no legend. She dropped the news on me like a bomb, the tinny voice from my cell speaker signaling surrender. College ain't my jam, Lily, Ellie said, her words lackluster. I'm dropping out. I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, multitasking between the call and my constitutional law textbook. You're bailing? Just like that? Got better things lined up than being a brain like you, she snapped back. There was a heavy dose of her trademark venom in her voice. The same one that could turn from sweetie to serpent in a single sentence. So, what? You're skipping off into the sunset with the first guy who bats an eye? I snorted. Exactly, she hissed. Someone's gotta live a little while you bury yourself in those dusty books. Wouldn't want to die alone with cats as my only company. I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Ellie could never resist a jab. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in the back of a dimly lit church, law book hidden in my lap, as Ellie strutted down the aisle. She had nabbed herself a husband before she'd even figured out who she was. It was like she was playing life's game without bothering to learn the rules. After the I do's, she swanned over with her glass raised, smirking like she'd won some sort of race. Cheers to me, the married woman, and to you, Lily, maybe you'll graduate to cat lady soon? She snickered, cruelty wrapped in a toast. I bit back the anger, knowing Ellie relished any sign of getting under my skin. Maybe, but at least I'll have a law degree to hang on the wall. Cats or not. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're better than me, with your big dreams of being a hotshot lawyer? As she flittered away to go cut the cake, a part of me wanted to scream. I wanted to shake some sense into her. But I stayed in my seat, the anger simmering. Back on campus, I poured myself more into my studies. The late nights were my fortress from Ellie's barbed comments. Every essay, every exam was another brick in my walls, fortifying my future against her cynicism. Ellie and I were on divergent paths, she, reveling in the now with a sharp tongue, and I, building a foundation for tomorrow with gritted teeth. That was just the way of it. You can't pick your family. But you sure as hell can pick which of their words to listen to. And Ellie's? I was learning to let them go like seeds in the wind, insignificant and unworthy of taking root. Turning 30 hit different. The job at Uncle John's law firm was steady. Every day in court was like a chess game. I'd become good at it, keeping my cool under those fluorescent lights. Mark and I had been an item since who knows when. We figured, why not make it official? So we planned to. Dad's been gone a while now. I don't bring it up much. Stuff happened, he's not here, we move on. That means I've kind of been both the rock and the hard place for myself. When I said to Mom and Ellie, "Hey, I'm marrying Mark in a bit." They just shrugged. "That's nice," Mom said without looking up from her cards. "Ellie?" She couldn't even pause her TV show. I heard her mumble a congrats, buried under a heap of reality show noise and screams of her children. Where is her husband Dave? He was almost never at home. Living with Uncle John's sometimes biting sense of legal wisdom wasn't much different. I'd tell him about the upcoming wedding and he'd just grunt, "You sure about the prenup?" Romance isn't exactly our family style. So here I am, 2 weeks out, and it's all about the bare minimum. I want a quiet do. Some folks would take Mom and Sis ignoring the whole deal like a punch. I take it like a typical Tuesday. No help? No problem. It's just Mark and me, and that's plenty. I draft my own contracts by day, iron out merge clauses, and at night, I scroll through potential honeymoon spots on my phone. No fluff, just picking a place to unwind. After the case I just cracked, I need it. Weddings bring out strange in folks, I guess. Mom suddenly caught up with her bridge club, acting like playing cards is her full-time job. I dropped by to give her an update on the no-fuss dress I picked, not that she asked. She barely glances up, "Don't stress. It'll be fine." Full house. I should have knocked. "Cool, Mom," I say, but I'm talking to the wall because she's dealing cards again. Ellie's the same. She calls and it's one crisis after another. "I can't find a dress," she complains over the phone. "Ellie, just wear something from your closet." She huffs like I've suggested hiking the Everest in flip-flops. "Fine," she snaps. I go about my days, bits and pieces of the wedding falling together between deposition prep and client consultations. Mark's doing his share, but mostly he's just keeping me sane. Always a joke ready to diffuse my stress like a bomb squad pro. I handle the indifferences from Mom and Ellie the same way I manage everything else, with a little nod and a lot of getting on with it. It's like being in the eye of my own personal hurricane, watching all the whirlwinds, but not really feeling them. I've gotten good at it, too good maybe. In the end, it's simple. I'm not walking down the aisle to make a statement. It isn't a parade or a show. It's just signing papers, making things official, a modest gather-up for a lifetime of more down-to-earth moments with Mark. He's the I do at the end of my very practical, very organized checklist. As for Mom and Ellie, well, they'll show up or they won't. The wedding will happen, and then life will roll on. It always does. I was mid-sentence with a contractor, haggling over the price of folding chairs when Mom's call threw everything off balance. Her voice, usually as steady as a metronome, was all over the place, like a needle jumping grooves on a record. "Honey, Ellie's been left by her husband, with 2 kids," she said, and I could almost picture her hand fluttering to her chest, the way she does when the latest gossip hits. I was so stunned I almost dropped the phone. "What? You're joking." "No, dear. I wish I were. She's a mess. We're all in shock. It's just, would you consider postponing?" I bristled at the notion, felt that stubborn streak flare up. "Postpone? Mom, I've got a timetable tighter than a drum here. You know that." "But Ellie is going to have to deal with her own mess," I cut in, with an edge that said the discussion was closed. But Mom wasn't done. "She needs us, needs family. Maybe it's not a good time for a wedding?" I scoffed. "And when is it ever a good time, huh? Look, I'm sorry for Ellie, but life doesn't stop. Mine doesn't, at least." I turned to Mark, who had witnessed the tail end of the call, his eyebrows doing a high-wire act. "What now?" he asked, towing the line between concern and asking for the mess report. "Ellie's husband ditched her. Mom wants us to push back the wedding." His eyes widened slightly. "Wow. Are we?" I shook my head. "No way. We've bent over backward for this family enough." He nodded, his hand finding my shoulder, a silent signal of support. "All right. But you okay with that?" I took a deep breath, somewhere between frustration and determination. Hell yes. It's our turn, Mark. We've done the waiting, the pleasing. Remember? I remember, he said, that low voice steady as ever. It's just family is. I raised a hand. Don't say complicated. It's overrated. Mark chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. Alright, tough cookie. You call the shots. A mix of guilt and relief swirled in me, but I pushed it down. I had enough on my plate without adding second helpings of pity for Ellie. Life ensued. I went back to ticking off checkboxes, ignoring the clawing feeling that comes with not being the good guy. Or in this case, the good sister. The day didn't start off great, and I could tell it was only destined to nosedive from there. Mark was trying to steer clear of any drama, but somehow, we wound up accepting the dinner invite at Mom's place. Just a family get-together, she'd said. But I knew better. As soon as we walked in, the air was heavy, kinda like walking into a wall. Mom had this stern look plastered on her face, and Ellie, my sister, she was already a few glasses in, eyes red and puffy like she's been crying or something. I barely got my coat off, before Ellie slurred out, "Lily, you gotta understand." Her voice wobbled like one of those wacky inflatable arm guys outside a car dealership. "I'm going through hell, and there you are parading your happiness around." She clutched at her heart out of habit. But we all know that she is absolutely healthy now, her childhood illness has sunk into oblivion. Stiffening up, I shot back, "Ellie, it's not like that, and you know it. Stop playing the victim." Mark put a hand on my shoulder, urging me to ease up, but I was past fed up. Mom chimed in then, voice cold as ice. "Lily, we're just asking for a little compassion. Is that too much?" I could feel the temperature drop with her every word. Still, Mark and I, we were a united front. "We've planned this for a year," Mark said, his firmness a surprise even to me. "It's not just Lily's call, it's mine too, and we're not postponing." Mom gave us a hard look, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ungrateful," she hissed at me. "After all we've done for you." I snorted, narrowed my eyes. "Ungrateful? Really? For what, exactly?" That's when Mom dropped the real bomb, her voice a mix of fury and something that sounded like a twisted form of caring. "If you can't cancel your wedding, then at least skip your honeymoon. Stay and watch your nieces and nephews. Give your sister a break to travel, let her heal." Mark snorted, disbelief coloring his chuckle. "Are you serious right now? We're supposed to give up our honeymoon for Ellie's getaway?" Ellie stood up, swaying a little as she leaned across the table with a sneer. "Yeah, 'cause why should you be happy if I'm not?" I stood up too, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Enough, Ellie. Life doesn't stop for you. I'm getting married, and I'm going on my honeymoon. End of discussion." Mom stared at us, eyes flinty. "If you walk out that door, Lily, don't bother coming back." "And if I stay, what? I get guilt-tripped and walked over my entire life?" I snapped, already heading for the door. Mark was right behind me. Neither of us looked back, even as the door slammed shut with a sound that said more clearly than any words could, the line was drawn. It was us against them, and I was done playing by their crazy rules. I was knee-deep in Tool and Good Wishes when Uncle John's number lit up my phone. "Ain't this the time when you're supposed to be getting pampered or something?" was his gruff opener when I answered. "Yeah, well, you know how it goes," I replied, half laughing, despite the frustrations nipping at my heels. "You got a minute?" he asked. His voice had that no-nonsense edge to it that I remembered from when I was a kid. "Sure, lay it on me," I said, stepping out onto the venue's balcony for some privacy. "It's about your mom's latest request," Uncle John started, and I braced myself. "Listen, kiddo, she tried to strong-arm me to cancel your vacation. No vacation, no honeymoon, says it's what family does, supports each other and all that jazz." I felt my hands clench around the phone. "Is that right?" I managed to say, trying to keep the ice out of my voice. Yeah, but don't worry, I told her where to shove it, Uncle John replied, and I could almost hear him spitting the words out. Uncle Jay, you didn't have to get involved, I said, the gratitude and stress mixing up inside me. I'll fight your corner any day. This is your time. You and Mark deserve to enjoy all of it, without any crap thrown your way. I just can't believe she's trying to ruin my wedding and break my honeymoon, I said, rubbing my temple. Stubborn as a mule, that sister of mine, he chuckled, but it was that kind of laugh that didn't reach the eyes. Anyway, I've got your back. You two just focus on tying the knot and then getting naughty on your own time, if you catch my drift. I laughed, a real laugh this time. Couldn't have said it better myself, Uncle. Course you couldn't. I'm the family wordsmith, he said, his voice proud as a peacock. Then he lowered it a notch. Remember, kiddo, you're doing nothing wrong. Go, get married, be happy. I promised I would and hung up, feeling a notch lighter, but with the weight of the whole situation still sitting on my chest like an unwelcome cat. The rehearsal dinner was buzzing when I got back. Mark caught my eye across the room and frowned when he saw my face. Everything okay? He mouthed. I nodded and made my way through a sea of relatives and friends, plastering on a smile like it was lipstick. Mark met me halfway, his hands finding mine, his eyes searching my face. You're worrying me, he said. It was Uncle John. Mom's trying to recruit him into her save the date but screw the honeymoon campaign. I sighed, feeling the whole thing splayed out again. He snorted. She's relentless. Like a dog with a bone, I agreed. But Uncle John's not biting. I swear, he's the only one actually standing up for us. Well, we've got each other. That's the main thing, Mark replied, and wrapped me in a hug that felt like armor against the world's crazy. The murmur of family and friends bubbled around us, all unsuspecting of the undercurrents they were swimming in. The table settings gleamed, glasses clinked, and laughter soared like fireflies in the evening light. As I lay down that night, with the stars wearing their best shine outside my window, I could only hope that our next chapter would be written on the bright side of this often too shadowed world. Mark's steady breathing in the dark was a promise and question all at once. It didn't matter what came next. His yes matched my yes, and that felt like the only answer we'd ever need. After what they tried to pull off, Mom and my sister said they wouldn't be caught dead at my wedding. They made sure everyone knew it too, telling anyone who'd listen that I was just a cold piece of work. They didn't stop there, though. They started spreading all sorts of nonsense around town about me, but you know what? It didn't matter one bit. The big day came, and it was nothing short of awesome. Our family and friends filled the place up. There were so many of them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, laughing and joking around. It was loud, and it was fun, and nobody brought up Mom and Sis. It was like we all agreed not to let them ruin the vibe. My bridesmaids were a whirlwind of activity. Girl, are those butterflies in your stomach? Or just the 2 bottles of champagne we guzzled? Lisa, always the joker, nudged me with her elbow as she adjusted my veil for the 100th time. Just excitement, I guess, I replied, my smile as wide as the horizon. Well, you look banging, Jen chimed in, her hands making tiny adjustments to my bouquet. Mark's gonna fall over when he sees you. The ceremony space was filled with the tunes of a string quartet digging into my favorite classics, nothing fancy, just raw music that filled the soul. Damn, can you believe you're about to get hitched? Lisa sighed, her tough tone softened a touch by the moment. Believe it? I planned it, down to the last petal. I laughed as I peeked through the crack of the door at the guests filtering in. The ceremony was a blur of words and emotions. When it came time to exchange vows, Mark's voice filled the room. I promise to keep it real, to be your partner in crime, to have your back, and make you laugh when life sucks. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking just a little. I promise to always be honest, to support your crazy schemes, to love you even when you leave your socks on the floor. The room erupted into laughter and cheers, the love tangible in the air like the warmth of the spring sun coming through the windows. As husband and wife, you may now kiss the bride, the officiant announced, and Mark wasted no time. It was the kind of kiss that said we were in this for the long haul, for better, for worse, and hell, even for the mundane. Later, as the party wound down, Uncle John found me, his face a little shiny from the festivities. "You did good, kid. And if anyone gives you trouble, you send them my way." "I will, Uncle Jay, thanks for everything," I said, meaning every word. As the night drew to a close, and the last stragglers left, Mark and I stood hand in hand, taking in the moment. "Ready to start this adventure?" he asked, squeezing my hand. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I replied, and we stepped out into the cool night air. We climbed into the car, cans clattering behind us, a playful, "just married" sign taped to the back. I looked over at Mark, his face illuminated by the streetlights as we drove away. "This is it," he said, his hand finding mine. "This is us," I said, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. "My new hubby and I took off to this cozy beach spot for our honeymoon. Just us, the sun, and the sea. It was like a week-long chill pill. And nope, I did not call mom or sis. Not once. And I didn't miss them either. Yeah, family's supposed to be your rock, right? But sometimes, you gotta build your own foundation. That's what I did, and it's solid. I don't need that kind of crazy in my life, and I'm not about to invite it back in." My name is Kate. Life's got a real funny way of showing you who's boss. Just a short while back, I'd tell you I was hitched to James. You'd see me coming down the hall, with that "just married" kind of glow. I had faith that quitting my gig at Laurentech for our marriage was the smart play. Love trumps a paycheck, right? Laurentech was this quirky joint. God knows, they had more rules than a prison. One of them serious deal-breakers was about family. James put a ring on it and, boom, we're suddenly in the hot seat. Bossman Joe pulls us in, hands us the ultimatum like we're on some second-rate game show. "One of you's gotta roll out," he said, face as serious as a heart attack. We had a back and forth that night that would have made for prime reality TV drama. I guess love made me a little stupid. I blinked first and tendered my papers the next day. Threw in the towel on my up-and-coming tech career, to play house. If I knew then what I know now, well, ain't that just life's tagline? Flash to today, and here I am sweeping up cereal because Mr. Promotion on the horizon can't find it in his heart to aim for the bowl. "Jim, your mother teach you that?" I called out to the other room, my voice getting lost somewhere in the drywall. "What's that?" he shot back, voice all tight, like my question was a personal attack. "Never mind," I muttered, letting it drop. Not worth the hassle. Used to be we could rib each other. Now every word's like stepping on a landmine. Lovely, huh? 2 hours later, he's on the couch, all zoned out in front of the TV, and I'm assessing the remains of what used to be us. "We gonna talk or you planning on marrying the couch?" I said. James didn't even bother looking my way. "About what?" I counted to 10 in my head. "I dunno, how about us? Where this train wreck's heading?" He shrugged. "Thought we were good." We stewed in that silence for a while, the TV chattering away to itself. Then it hit me, the realization I'd been living in a glass house someone else threw a rock at. Everything we built, up in smoke, and neither of us knew how to stop the burn. It's funny, ain't it? How fast a life can turn on its head. One day you're planning forever, next day you can't even chat about the weather without it turning into World War III. I stood there a while longer, looking at the man on the couch. He was as familiar as a stranger on a bus. The transition from indifference to cruelty was subtle, but I felt it. It was in the cooling air of the disbanded summer and the sting of a slight wind. Things started changing, like the weather. In the kitchen, I stood there thinking about how things used to be smooth and easy. But now? It felt like walking on ice, unsure if you'll stand or fall. I knew the kind of steak James liked, rare and yet not too bloody, salted and peppered with precision. I had it down to an art, but that day, the oven betrayed me, or maybe it was the other way around. James walked in from the living room, the sound of his heavy footsteps warning me of the mood he was in before he even entered. A second later, there he was, filling the doorway, his eyes taking in the spread as if he was about to pounce on it and tear it apart with his hands rather than sit down to eat like a civilized person. "What's this?" He pointed at the plate. "Your job too tough for you now?" His voice was like gravel, rough and scraping. I knew to tread carefully. "It's just a bit cooler than usual, James." "The steak, I mean. It's not." "Not what?" He cut me off, glaring. I bit my lip, not saying what was on my mind, because voicing it out loud would only make it worse. "Look, Kate," he said, his voice lowering, like that of a predator hiding in the shadows. "When I say I want my steak hot, I mean I want to feel the animal's soul leaving the body when I cut into it. This," he tapped the steak with the back of the fork, and it sounded like a judge's gavel, "this is dead twice over." He didn't yell, but his voice had a sharpness to it that made my skin crawl. It was almost clinical, detached yet loaded with a venom that was reserved just for me. No loud scene, no drama for the outside world, just the cold, hard words that cut through me. I stayed silent, knowing anything I said would just fan the flames. He pushed the plate away, and his downcast eyes met mine, full of something icy. "Son of a, you know what, forget it." He turned his back on me and the food. "I'm not eating this crap." He grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door, his movements jerky. "Fix your mistakes, Kate. Or next time it'll be more than just dinner in the trash." The door slammed, a period mark to the tail end of the happiness we used to have. I was left there, staring at the closed door, the click of the latch loud in the quiet of the apartment. As his footsteps faded, I let out the breath I was holding. The steak. It just laid there, looking as forlorn as I felt. The trash can was the next thing I'd have to face, a cold reminder of my mistake. Throwing it away felt like I was tossing a part of myself with it, my effort, my care, my desire to make things work. But none of it seemed to matter. Perfect, they called us. His parents, our friends, they all admired the facade we put up. But behind closed doors, the story was different. Demands grew as my self-esteem plunged. James' favorite pastime became scrutinizing every corner of the house, every dish I prepared. I had no job, no income, just him and his approval, which became scarcer with each passing day. And on the nights his parents witnessed an act slightly less convincing than usual, the sofa was my cold reminder of failing to play the doting wife. Tonight was no different. The dinner table was set for two plus his ever-judging eyes. "What's this?" James's voice was flat, pointing at the steamed broccoli. "Dinner," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Broccoli again? Don't you know anything else?" he scoffed, pushing the plate away. I bit back a sharper reply, knowing it wouldn't help. "I'll make something else if you're not happy with it." "That'd be a first," he muttered. The retort stung, fueling a silent anger inside me. I turned back to the kitchen, feeling his gaze on my every move. "Where are you going?" he barked. "I said I'd make you something else, didn't I?" My voice carried a hint of defiance I didn't know I had left. James stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Sit down. Let's not pretend like you've got other things to do. Your world revolves around me, remember?" His words were a leash, pulling me back. "Yeah, I remember." I heard him sit back down. "No, sorry, no, thank you." Just a heavy silence that settled over us like dust. As the night dragged on, so did his critique. "This house is a mess," he announced, seemingly out of nowhere. I followed his gaze. The books on the coffee table weren't perfectly aligned, a pillow was slightly askew, life happened in our house. But not the life he wanted. Clean it up. I wanted to scream. To tell him a house lived in would never meet his pristine standards. Instead, I fixed the pillow, straightened the books, and swallowed the lump in my throat. The place could use some work, I muttered under my breath. What was that? His voice had a sharp edge. Nothing, I said quickly, louder now. Just talking to myself. He eyed me with suspicion, but said nothing more. In bed, I lay awake, staring at the darkness. The chasm between us was filled with unspoken thoughts and stifled dreams. I thought of all the words I wanted to say, the accusations, the hurt, anger, and all the wishes for a life that felt like it was slowly slipping away from my grasp. I was tethered, bound by invisible chains of dependency and fear. Perfect, they said. But perfect was just a word, and words were the cheapest currency in the economy of our sham of a marriage. So there I was, just a regular day heading back from the store, arms loaded with groceries. Never did it cross my mind that a bit of ice on the sidewalk would land me square on my rear, but life's got a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? Down I went with a nasty slip, and the pain shot right through my leg like nothing I've felt before. I tried to get up, but no dice. My leg was having none of it, throbbing like mad. That's when a couple of folks came rushing over. You alright? They asked. Must have seen the whole clumsy show. Trying to keep my cool, I just nodded. I think I busted my leg. They didn't think twice and hailed down a cab to whisk me to the hospital. At the ER, it was a circus. Nurses took their sweet time before a doc finally got to me. He had just one look at my leg and his face said it all before his mouth did. It's broken, he told me, matter of fact like he was talking about the weather. I grimaced, not at the news, but at the thought of facing James with this. While waiting for the docs to do their thing, I figured I should let my husband know, but the dude didn't pick up his phone. Sent him a text, broke my leg, at the hospital, short and sweet, but not even a peep back from him. Turns out, I was stuck there till morning, and the hospital was no hotel, that's for sure. All I got was cold coffee and a nurse who seemed like she'd rather be anywhere else. As soon as I could hobble, they shoved some papers at me to sign and sent me packing in a cab. Back home, the cast was as white as the snow outside and twice as annoying. James was waiting, his face like a thundercloud ready to burst. No, how you doing or what happened, he just goes. Where's dinner? Really? I'm standing there on crutches, leg in a cast, and he's all mad about dinner? I snapped back. What do you think? I went dancing. Look at my leg. But he's on a roll, acting like I did it on purpose. You always have excuses, he sneered. Can't even do the one thing you're supposed to. Can you believe that? After a night in the ER, all he cared about was his stupid dinner. The whole thing was too much. There I was, hurt and shaking, and he couldn't care less. The air was as cold as that patch of ice I'd slipped on, and I knew right then, this was more than just a broken leg. It was like the ice under us had cracked wide open. I hauled myself toward the kitchen table, crutch by crutch, as if every step was a mile. I was cooking dinner for my beloved husband, it's funny. The bin was near overflowing, and I'd missed it. It was a tiny slip-up, but with James, nothing was ever tiny. What's this now? James barked, catching the sight of the unemptied bin. You're home all day, and you can't even manage the simplest tasks. He stormed over, all bluster and rage, and with one swift motion, toppled the bin, its contents sprawling like a small-scale disaster at my feet. Clean it up, he thundered. My fingers shook as I reached down, but not from the physical pain of my injury. It was something deeper, a crack in something that had once been whole. That night was sleepless, the echoes of his voice, blending with the hot sting of tears. Morning came with no comfort, just the light revealing the mess of last night. I sat at the kitchen table, papers in front of me, the sound of coffee dripping in the background. James stumbled in, the stink of beer still on him from last night. "Morning," he growled, his voice like gravel. "What's for breakfast?" I pushed the papers toward him. "I've got your breakfast right here." He squinted down at the divorce papers, unreadable for a moment. Then he looked up, a sly, mocking smile spreading across his face. "You serious?" "As a heart attack," I said. Though inside, my heart was racing, like it could bust out of my chest. He threw his head back and laughed, rough and loud. "You ain't got the guts." I clenched my jaw. My voice came out low and steadfast. "Already did it. Just need your sign off." He leaned down, face inches from mine. "You think you can survive without me? You're a broken bird, can't even take out the trash." "I'm done talking, James," I said, meeting his stare. "Sign the papers, or I'll have the law make you sign." He scoffed, grabbed the pen with a squeezed grip, and scrawled his name, each stroke heavy and deliberate. He threw the pen down like it was on fire. "Good luck, darling," he sneered. "You'll be crawling back before the month's up." But I wouldn't. I couldn't. This was my line in the sand, the overflowing bin that couldn't take more trash, more lies. Despite everything, I smiled, because that paper felt like the first step on crutches toward a different life. "Crawling's not my style," I said quietly. When I opened my eyes the next morning, everything was too quiet. Too calm. It was weird waking up to silence when inside, I felt like everything was about to blow. That's when he told me. Over a cup of coffee, he said we had to get the property split locked down. And, oh boy, he already had a lawyer in mind. Some hotshot in the city, near Lauren Tech. "You coming with me?" he said, not asking. "We'll get this done today." I really didn't have much of a say with my leg all broken and useless, so I just nodded. He helped me into the car, propped up my cast, and off we went. Everything was fine, normal even, until it wasn't. We were zipping down the highway, the city in the distance, like a bunch of toy buildings. Then he pulled over, sudden-like. Said the wheel needed air. "I'll check it out," he mumbled. The next thing I know, he told me to get out of the car. "Just want to make sure we are safe." His tone was off, and not in a good way. But I got out, leaning on the car for support and feeling every bit as fragile as my plastered leg. He fiddled around by the tires for a minute, and then, without any kind of warning, hopped back in and hit the gas. I mean, he took off so fast I barely had time to shout. So there I was, out in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the sound of his car disappearing down the highway. I couldn't believe it. Was this really happening? I didn't have to think twice. My phone was in my hand, and I was hitting record. When he picked up, he was all smug. I've never hated the sound of a voice more. "Come back," I yelled. "This isn't funny." But he just laughed. Actually laughed. Said something about me getting what I deserved for wanting a divorce. Can you believe that? The line went dead, and the weight of what just happened slammed into me like a brick wall. I stood there on the side of the road, watching the taillights of his car disappear into a blurred speck in the distance. I was alone, miles from anything that resembled civilization. The chill in my bones went deeper than the winter's touch. It was the harsh truth gnawing at me. I was truly on my own. Cars whizzed by, each one felt like a sting. None of them stopped. Why would they? It's not their drama, not their craziness to deal with. I was just some woman on crutches on the side of the road to them. The chill was setting in, biting through my jacket as the minutes dragged on. There wasn't a soul in sight until a gorgeous Jeep truck rattled to a halt beside me. Behind the wheel was the one I least expected to see here. My former boss, Joe. As the car's heater blasted warm air, I could feel my cheeks and hands start to regain some feeling. Joe glanced over at me, his brow heavy with concern. "You look like crap, Kate, you know that?" he said, gruff, but kindly. "Why the hell didn't you call someone?" I shrugged, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. "Thought I could handle it," I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. He left you on the side of the road with a broken leg? His voice rose, incredulous and angry. That James is a damn coward. I nodded, hugging myself tighter as I remembered the icy wind and the pain. Yeah, I guess he is. We reached Lauren Tech, and Joe practically carried me up to the 5th floor. The familiar sounds of the workplace surrounded me, a jarring yet comforting reminder of a life I once knew. Inside his office, Joe handed me a mug of coffee, which I clutched gratefully between my hands. The aroma was a heady promise of warmth. Thanks, Joe, I said after taking a tentative sip. The coffee was strong, just the way I liked it, a sharp contrast to the bitter cold I had endured. He grunted, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Can't believe that bastard. After everything. Let's not talk about him, I interjected, keen to avoid going down that road. We sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. It was a comfortable silence, born from years of working together and understanding the ebb and flow of each other's moods. Joe finally stopped pacing and turned to face me. What are you going to do now, Kate? His tone was serious, the playful edge gone. I don't know, I admitted, feeling lost. I really don't know. His gaze softened, and he took the seat across from me. Look, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. We could use you back here. The team hasn't been the same since you left. A spark of something, hope, maybe, or just surprise, fluttered in my chest. You serious? As a heart attack, he said dryly. You were one of the best. Hell, you are the best. I should have fought harder to keep you. I smiled weakly, both warmed and overwhelmed by his offer. Wouldn't be easy with my leg like this. We'll manage. I'll wait until you're back on your feet, literally. He leaned forward, a determined glint in his eyes. I'm not taking no for an answer. The toughness of his words, the undeniable command in his voice, it felt reassuring. Against the backdrop of uncertainty and pain, his offer was a beacon. I'll think about it, I said, knowing full well I'd already made up my mind. I'll think about it, I repeated, allowing a smile to play on my lips. Joe grunted in response, a sound that conveyed understanding and a touch of impatience. Having a purpose, a place to be, and the support of someone who believed in me was more than I could have hoped for given the day's events. It was an unexpected turn, but maybe, just maybe, it was the kind I needed. The air was thick with tension when James headed for the boss's door. The clump of his boots was more hesitant today, like he sensed the storm brewing. He pushed the door, and it creaked open, announcing his arrival to what was once his throne room. There I was, leaning against the desk, arms folded, waiting. James, come in, shut the door behind you, the boss said, his voice an even, ironed-out calm. James saw me and turned pale, but quickly pulled himself together. What's this about? He grumbled like a cornered animal, ready to bite. The boss gestured to the chair, but James didn't sit. Instead, he crossed his arms, a mirror image of my stance, but filled with defiance where mine held determination. James, the boss started, fixing him with a look that could freeze hell over. I always thought of you as a sharp man. But what you've done? That's the sharpest kind of stupid. James shot a glance at me, a mix of fear and anger in his eyes. So, she's been yapping, has she? What lies has she been selling? No lies needed, mate, I said, my voice steady as a heartbeat. Just played him the greatest hits of your ugly symphony. You've been recorded, clear as day. The boss reached into his desk, pulled out a recording device, and slid it across the table. Care to listen for nostalgia? James's face turned the color of concrete. You can't do this. You can't fire me over. Over what, James? Over you terrorizing your wife, my employee? Oh, I can. And I am. The boss cut in, his voice cold steel. James's eyes darted between the two of us, looking for some crack in the armor, some slip of weakness. But there wasn't one. I'll take you to court, he spat out. That's funny, I said with a cold laugh, 'cause that's exactly where we're going. Only difference is, I've got a bed of evidence, and you've got nothing but lies and empty threats. The boss stood up, the chair screeching against the floor like a war cry. Get out of my office, and get out of our lives. You're finished here. And with that, James's fate was sealed. In the courtroom, the evidence weighed heavier than his words, heavier than his anger. The judge didn't hesitate, hitting the gavel like a nail in the coffin of our married life. Sentence you to pay the compensation, and this court grants the separation, the judge announced, and it was like the first breath of spring air, chilly but promising blooms. Back at the job, I slid into the familiar groove of my work, but with a new shine on it. I wasn't just doing tasks, I was rebuilding. Every keystroke was a brick, every good morning mortar, every completed project a pillar in the house of my new life. Kate, my colleague Mark said, breaking my concentration. Must feel weird, huh? Getting everything back? I swiveled in my chair, facing him. Weird doesn't start to cover it, Mark. Feels like I've come back from the dead. Mark chuckled, his laughter rumbling like an old pickup truck. Zombie Kate, back for revenge. I cracked a smile. Something like that. Only this time, I'm not taking any crap from anyone. No more Mrs. Nice Gal. That's the spirit. You know, we all got your back here, no matter what. I nodded. The warmth in the office was more than the heating. It was the camaraderie, a shared fortress against any storm that might come. My name's Lisa. I never expected to walk into that party and find my whole world spun on its axis. But there I was, standing next to Rachel, hoping for a few laughs and free drinks. All it took was his hey to turn an ordinary night upside down. Rachel, who's that? I nudged her side, eyeing the guy with the easy smile and hands shoved casually into his jeans pockets. Oh, that's James, she half shouted over the music, went to college with him. Real chill guy. You wanna meet him? Sure, I shrugged. New faces meant new stories, but nothing prepared me for the instant connection. James had this way of talking like you were the only person in the room. And those green eyes? They didn't hurt either. So, you like the Rolling Stones? He caught me eyeing his t-shirt. Vintage band tees were everywhere, but I actually meant it when I said, only someone who really digs good music would wear Mick Jagger on their chest. He laughed. Are you calling me out or complimenting me? Guess you'll never know, I teased back. We were inseparable by the end of the night. We spoke about everything, from our love for old-school rock to the names we'd pick for our future pets. He got my number and didn't wait the so-called appropriate 3 days to call. He rang me up the next morning. It wasn't long before we were deep in the what-ifs of tomorrow, and it didn't sound crazy to be picking out rings and talking about forever. But forever comes with its own baggage, like it or not. Meeting the parents was on the horizon, I knew that. But nothing prepared me for the icy reception at the dinner table. Margaret, James's mom, was the first to break the so-called ice. So, Lisa, you work at the hospital, right? It wasn't the warmth of polite interest that coded her question, but something harder, like I was being appraised. Yeah, the county hospital, up north, I said as confidently as I could. And how much do they pay you for that? Her eyes were sharp, her tone sharper. I paused, James shot me a look, but I decided to be upfront. Enough to get by. My answer was clipped, I hated talking finances. Well, James does more than get by, she said. I glanced at James, who was calm and silent. I felt my face heat up. So, about this marriage, she continued as if my income was just a segue. A prenup is sensible, don't you think? It was like a punch to the gut. But I said, listen, I don't care about money. But whatever happens, the bit I send to Granny B each month, it's non-negotiable. Fair enough, his dad finally chimed in, that seems reasonable. The tone for this commitment was set, tough, not all sunshine and romance, but it was real. And real was something I could work with. Our wedding could have fit in a matchbox, no fanfare, just him, me, and a couple of signatures that sealed the deal. In the beginning, we were a team, tackling life from our small joint command center, his old house he'd owned for years. We had set up a system, half on everything. When I think about that time, it seemed straightforward. We wrote up a budget, penciled in time for chores, and even cooking was something we did together. There was comfort in the routine, in knowing what to expect when we both got home. He used to count minutes until I got home. We'd link up in the kitchen, not just for the food, but for those moments, you know. It wasn't just about filling our plates, it was about sharing the day, stirring and tasting, and laughing over a shared bottle of wine. But reality is a tough customer. 4 months down the line, and the teamwork was taking hits. The excuses rolled in. At first, it was just a bad day here and there, a boss on his back or a project running him ragged. "Babe, I'm beat," he'd say, dropping his bag by the door, not picking up the hints of garlic and basil in the air, the sound of something sizzling on the stove. "Gonna crash for a bit. You mind finishing up?" I didn't at first. Everyone's entitled to a bad day, right? But bad days started to string together like some lousy pearl necklace, each excuse shinier than the last. One night, I found him sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to some game on the TV. The floor was a maze of his work stuff, and the sink was an overstuffed exhibition of dirty dishes. "Honey, the kitchen's blowing up," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "You were supposed to handle it tonight." He gave me this quick glance, one of those, just a sec looks before focusing back on the players running across the screen. Yeah, I'll get to it. Just let me watch this play," he muttered, not moving an inch. But the plays went on, one after the other, and the kitchen stayed a mess. The tension was simmering, ready to boil over. "Look, I don't need plays, I need a partner," I snapped, surprising myself a bit with the sharp edge in my voice. "Chill, all right? It's just dishes," he shot back, his attention still on the game. We clashed like this, more and more. Those simple knots we tied at the mayor's office started to feel like some complex puzzles, impossible to solve. He retreated into his shell, all but locking me out. The split down the middle started to shift, what was meant to be equal began to weigh heavy on my side. Chores piled up, just like his excuses. That shared life we were supposed to be building felt more like a solo gig. 2 weeks of slugging it out on my own and I finally snapped. I never was one to kick up a fuss, but who could live like this? I cornered James as he walked through the door, oblivious with his headphones on. "James," I blurted out, unable to hide the annoyance in my tone, "what happened to sharing the load?" He looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head, pulling off his headphones. "What are you on about, Lisa?" he asked, genuinely confused or a damn good actor. "I spent nearly an hour scraping your dried up yogurt off the coffee table this morning. It's like living with a toddler." He just shrugged. That bloody shrug, like he didn't have a care in the world. "Chill out, will you? It's just a bit of mess." A bit of mess, he called it. So, I left his mess, stopped picking up his dirty socks, stopped doing his laundry. Petty? Sure, but I was at breaking point. Of course, that's when Margaret, his mother, decided to pop in unannounced. The perfect storm. "Look at this place," she said, her nose crinkled as if she'd just found a rotten egg under her seat. I tried to keep cool, offered her a cup of tea, but she was on the warpath. "James, this is no way for a man to live," she said sternly, eyes fixed on me. "I didn't raise you to be living in a pigsty." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Margaret, it's a 2-person job, and I've been doing it solo. I'm not his maid." "You're his wife," she snapped back. "And a wife keeps a clean home." I felt my face flush with anger. "And what does a husband do, Margaret?" I snapped back. "He's the breadwinner, she hollered back, missing the irony that I too had a full-time job. Margaret threw her hands up in the air and turned to James. "You're soft on her," she declared, as if I wasn't there. My Harold would have never stood for this nonsense. I wanted to tell her where Harold could stick it, but I held back. No point in making things nastier. Margaret stormed out, slamming the door with such force the family photos rattled against the wall. Now it was just me and James, standing in the rubble of our domestic battlefield. So James got knocked down a notch at work. He came home that day, dumped his keys like they were made of lead. "They're cutting back," he said, the words hung heavy in the air. "I'm off the management track." Just like that, he decides he's not gonna help with the bills no more. Suddenly, it's all on me. I was smacking pots and pans like they owed me money. The noise must have finally got to him. "Why are you making such a racket?" he asked, picking at his beer label. "Because someone's gotta pay for those beers," I snapped. "And keep this place looking half decent." What came next was like a round in the ring. "You expect me to chip in after a day like today?" he shot back. "Yeah, James," I said, not backing down an inch. "Because I had a cakewalk of a day, right?" He didn't have a comeback for that, just took another swig. "We had a deal. We share this, remember?" I said. James sat there, TV blaring, as if I wasn't even there. "A deal doesn't hold when things go south," he said, not even looking at me. I stood in front of the screen. "So, what? I'm supposed to just smile and nod and keep the house like some 1950s sitcom mom?" He just glared at me then, no love there, only irritation. "You wanted a partnership, here it is. This is life, deal with it." The words hung there, thick and toxic. His ignoring the problem wasn't going to make it vanish. We're supposed to be in this together. And that means not ditching out when it gets tough. I didn't ditch out. The job did. I wanted to shout, to yell, to make him see sense, but I knew it wouldn't get through. Instead, I let out a cold, hard laugh. "Good, and I'll do what? I'm not your maid, and I'm not an ATM. We'll see how long that lasts," he muttered, barely audible over the din of the TV. I turned off the TV. "We'll see how long we last if this is how it's gonna be." Silence filled the room, thick as the dirt I'd been cleaning all day. He looked away. I stormed off to bed. No more words that night, none that mattered anyhow. They were all bitter, all spat out with hurt more than real heart, but they stuck with me, like thorns in my side. The tension in the house was like walking into a wall of ice. Barely a word was passed between us without a sharp edge. James had taken to eating his meals alone, meals that Margaret dropped off with a thud at our door. I could hear the plastic containers hitting the wood, like the gavel of a judge passing sentence. "So, what are we having tonight?" I asked, poker-faced, as James marched past me, Margaret's cooking in hand. "Does it matter?" He barely glanced my way. "It's not like you're eating." It was true. I didn't have the stomach for food, not for what was in those containers. It was more than lasagna or stew, it was a heavy dose of rejection, served up by Margaret, and it had seeped into every room of the house. Then Granny B called. Cheerful and active, I could almost smell her lavender perfume through the phone. A visit from Granny could turn a place upside down, and that's what I sorely needed. A gust of fresh air. "I'm packing my bags, baby girl," she chuckled, but I heard the steel underneath. A will that had gotten her through tougher times than this. "I need to see your life." I broached the subject over dinner, a silent affair, with the clinking of cutlery replacing conversation. "Granny B wants to visit," I said, dropping the bomb without preamble. James paused mid-chew, his eyes hardening. "Here? Stay with us?" I nodded, gripping my fork like a lifeline. He shook his head, speaking with his mouth full like he suddenly forgot manners existed. "No chance. Margaret wouldn't like it." "Since when do we schedule our life around your mother?" The boldness of my words surprised even me. Margaret's voice sliced through from the doorway. "Since it's our house, girl. You just live here." The unfairness of it choked me like a noose. "Your son and I are supposed to be building a life together, Margaret." She snorted. "A life? You call this a life? Look at you two. I bring him food because someone needs to take care of my boy." James stood up, his chair scraping back like a scream. "And that's how it's gonna be. No visits. No changes. It's settled." I looked between them, the mother and son, and I felt it, the outsider tag slapping against my chest. "It's settled because you say so? What about what I want, what I need?" "You need to understand that things are the way they are," James shot back, red, flushing his cheeks. "My house, my rules." The ache spread from my heart to my fingertips, but I squared my shoulders. "It's also my home, James. Or at least it's supposed to be." James had no answer, just the hard line of his jaw telling me the conversation was over. But nothing was settled. Granny B would come, somehow, I'd make sure of it. For the first time, I wanted the battleground. If they wouldn't budge, neither would I. There was fight in me yet, and the freeze in the house would need my fire to thaw it, whether they liked it or not. For the third month in a row, James did not contribute his share to our family budget. I was carrying everything, the house, the groceries, and even his damn beer. We had a fight. That fight had been the last straw. James and I stood, facing each other, our words sharp enough to slice through steel. The room felt smaller as the tension grew, air thick with resentments saved up from months of silent battles and unspoken words. "I don't want you as my wife," James said, his voice dripping with that finality I knew was the end of everything. It didn't come out as a shout. That might have been better, a shout I could have responded to with fury. Instead, it was a low hiss, a deflating tire's last breath, leaving behind silence that echoed louder than any scream. I gathered what was left of my dignity. "Fine," I countered with as much steadiness as I could muster, despite the tremor I felt within. "I don't want to be where I'm not wanted." He didn't stop me as I started to pack my bags. Each piece of clothing folded felt like a piece of the life we'd built being tucked away, rendered insignificant. I headed to the door, my suitcase a loyal companion trailing behind me. James was still standing in the center of the chaos, the eye of the storm that had hit us over and over until we'd broken, pieces scattered beyond collection. He didn't move, didn't try to stop me. The door closed with a click much too gentle for the ending it represented. Outside, Granny B was in her old, dependable car that smelled of leather and peppermint, leaning over to open the passenger door. I heaped my suitcase into the back and slid in beside her without a word. "All set, dear?" Granny asked, her eyes soft but her voice strong, a rock in a swirling sea. "Yeah, I'm set," I mumbled, buckling the seatbelt over the hollow feeling in my chest. Granny B didn't start the car right away. "He's a fool," she said flatly, adding an expletive that would have made a sailor blush. I choked out a strained chuckle. "Granny!" "Well, it's true." She finally turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life reassuringly. "You're worth 10 of him. 15, even." She backed out and we started towards the new apartment. I didn't reply. Instead, I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, watching the landscape blur, the same way my thoughts were a jumble of memories and pain. Granny B didn't push with questions or platitudes. She just drove, every now and then muttering something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like curses aimed at James. The cozy rented apartment was in a normal neighborhood, a place where you could blend in and lick your wounds in peace. As Granny hauled my bag out of the car with surprising strength, I unlocked the door to the unknown. "Well," Granny said, clapping her hands together, "time to rebuild, kiddo. You've got a life to claim and that sorry excuse of a man to forget." I nodded, feeling the very first flutter of something like hope in my chest. Breaking points, I realized, weren't just about endings. They were about beginnings, too, messy, painful, but real. Fresh starts didn't erase the past, but they gave you a canvas to create something new. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what I needed. Granny B was sitting on my threadbare couch, her hands clasped over her knee, bouncing with what seemed like contained energy. Who knew that beneath that floral dress and the wrinkles was a woman with the heart of a Wall Street hustler? So you're telling me, all the dough I sent you for your meds and stuff, you've been playing the market with it? I stared at her in disbelief. Granny B chuckled and winked. Honey, you think I'd let your hard-earned cash rot under a mattress? No way. I've been growing it, bit by bit. I was flabbergasted. It felt unreal. I crunched the divorce papers in my hand, knowing that what Granny B had just told me was going to flip the script in a major way. James and Margaret, the perfect couple from next door, agreed to meet us one last time. Probably thought they could offer me some friendly advice on starting over. Margaret opened the door, all fake smiles. Well, if it isn't the soon-to-be single lady. Come in, we were just talking about you. James sat at the dining table, smirking without a care in the world. Good of you to come by. We need to talk about the neighborhood, now that you'll probably be moving somewhere more, affordable. I clenched my jaw but remembered Granny's news. I needed this. Actually, James, I won't be going anywhere. Granny B piped up. She's got a juicy bit of news. Tell em, hon. I enjoyed the suspense stretching their faces tight. Turns out I got a little nest egg waiting for me. Granny's been smart with the money. James laughed, harsh and loud. What? Did you win the lottery or something? Granny B grinned, sharp as a tack. Better. I turned her spare change into a cool 2 mil. The smiles fell off James and Margaret's faces like overripe fruit. 2 million? Margaret's voice came out strangled. Yep, and I don't plan to spend it on this neighborhood. My words felt heavy as I watched their painted-on warmth crumble. Granny slapped a hand on her thigh, triumphant. Ain't that something? Just when you think life's kicked you, it decides to kiss you instead. James started babbling something about how half of this money belongs to him. I burst out laughing, reminding him of the prenuptial agreement I had signed. I swear, at this moment, his mother would like to go back 6 months to destroy this paper. James and Margaret sat in silence, looking at us with puppy dog eyes. I couldn't help but relish the irony. We didn't linger much longer, there was nothing left to say. As we walked out, Granny B draped an arm around my shoulders. So, what's first on the millionaire to-do list? She asked, squeezing me tight. First, I'm getting an ice cream. A big one. With all the fixings. I said, the future suddenly bright and wide open. Granny let out a hearty laugh, the sound mingling with the promise of an unseen fortune, now seen, and closer than ever. The phone rang again. I was pretty sure it was James trying his luck once more, but this time, it went straight to voicemail. I had stuff to sort out and no desire to entertain that mess. I heaved a sigh, looking around my cramped apartment cluttered with memories, too many of them pinned to James, and a shadow that loomed like a bad smell. Grandma, with her sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, was right as rain. Why do you even keep that thing on? Grandma gestured at the phone with a scoff, busy shuffling through a pile of real estate listings. Shrugged, I tossed the phone on the couch. Guess I'm too soft. Squishy as overripe tomato, she snorted. We need to get moving. I don't want James or his mama knocking on our door, trying to weasel back into our lives when we've barely shucked em off. I know, Grams. Thanks. I flashed her a grateful look. So, where to? She slapped a listing onto the kitchen table. It was circled in bold. Here. 2 bedrooms, cleaner air, away from unwanted pests. I skimmed the details. Looks decent, Grams. Any pizza joints nearby? The next day dawned fresh. We were off, the apartment ad in hand and a skip in Grandma's step. The listing agent met us at the property, all smiles and slicked back hair, reeking of too much aftershave. Welcome, ladies. He extended his hand right at Grandma. She eyed it like it was a dead fish, but shook it all the same. Cut to the chase, hotshot. We're not here for pleasantries. I bit back a laugh as the agent's smile twitched. Of course, of course. He quickly unlocked the door. This way, please. The place was a gem compared to where we were. Good light, clean floors, and the air didn't hold any of James' cologne. Grandma haggled like she was born in a market stall. The price dropped. Terms changed. By the time we walked out, the agent looked 2 inches shorter. The move went smooth. Neighbors were quick to say hi, a couple of them inviting us over for beers and a barbecue. Asked about my story, but I kept it simple. I was done letting my past hitch a ride. The new place shaped up nice. I continued to work as a nurse. Grandma found her corner for knitting and gossiping with Mrs. Hem from next door, who had more sass packed in her tiny frame than anyone I'd ever met. One evening, I grabbed a pizza, from the new joint, of course, and headed home. As I flipped open the box, the steam carried that cheesy aroma up, and I couldn't help but smile. And so we settled in, me and Grandma, our little team. The taste of fresh starts and thick crust pizza in the air, laughter from the neighbor's yard spilling in through our open window, and a sense of peace finally making itself at home. James and his empty promises faded into the background noise, just like the buzz of the city we'd left behind. I was looking forward, and the view was pretty damn good. Life was as predictable as a routine dental checkup until today. My name's Jenny, your average tooth fairy who trades in molars for money, except that I work with state-of-the-art equipment in a swanky downtown clinic. My husband, Mark, is pretty much the academic type, graying at the temples and all. He lectured in the halls I once roamed as a student, though we never swapped anything more than a hello back then. It was only after my cap and gown were tucked away that we started sharing dinners, and before you knew it, vows. You could say we lived a standard married with no kids, just a couple of lazy goldfish life. Until today. Exhausted, slipping out of my work shoes, I saw them, divorce papers, as stark and chilling as an extracted wisdom tooth, lying beside a note on a coffee table that had seen better days, his handwriting, no doubt. Grimacing, I picked up the note, his words punched me in the gut harder than any root canal ever would. Jenny, I'm tired. Tired of the humdrum, of papers, of people. I need silence, not the kind we got on Sunday mornings, but the deep kind that you only find away from civilization. Consider this my path to becoming a nobody, to finding some darn peace. Mark. My hands trembled, the note nearly crumpling in my grip. No dramatic outburst, shocked as that to you. I uncapped one of the pens that was always scattered around and scribbled on the back of some grocery receipt, the only paper in immediate reach, then dialed Mark, heart drumming a harsh beat against my ribs. The line clicked, and after what seemed like a year, his familiar, now distant voice answered. Jenny? Mark. What's this about becoming a nobody, huh? You dumping our years together, like last week's trash? Jenny, you're not getting it. I can't. I don't want to. It's not you, it's... Cut the crap, Mark. You leave a note? Papers? Just like that? My voice rose as I gripped the phone like it was a lifeline. Where are you? There was a pause, a silence that spoke volumes. Somewhere you can't find me. Somewhere I can be alone. Alone? And what am I supposed to do, huh? Just sit tight and smile while you play hermit? Jenny, please. No, you listen. You can't just decide you're bored, Anne. Bored isn't the word, Jenny. I need something else, something different. What? Silence? You want silence, by earplugs. But you don't just get to check out. I spat the words out as if they were sour. Jenny, please try to understand. Oh, I understand, all right. Understood loud and clear, Professor. You've made your point. Enjoy your bloody peace then. The line went dead with a finality that echoed in the now too quiet room. The note lay there, staring up at me with its life-altering news, and I was left to figure out if I was to press on with the painful extraction of Mark from my life or root around in the mess for a sliver of hope. It seemed I had more than just teeth to pull. The clinic reeked of strong antiseptic. Where it used to put me at ease, now, it just stirred the pot of my mind, brimming with gossip. Mark, my ex, gone puff, just like that. And the fact that everyone wouldn't shut up about it was getting under my skin. The phone was buzzing again. It never eased up. I knew without looking it was more of the same nosy folks prying for details. Sam's Dental, how may I help you? I answered, using the clinic's name to avoid personal questions. Hey, it's Lizzie from math department. We heard about Mark. You holding up okay? I sighed. Yeah, Lizzie, I'm doing my job. Anything else? I mean, it's just weird, right? Mark's such an urban guy. She pried, digging for dirt. It's his choice, I snapped, a bit more sharply than intended. Sorry, it's just been a rough day. I could almost hear her shrug through the phone. Sure, just checking in. You know how it is here, we're all a bit nosy. The clinic was quieter than usual. I could almost hear the whispers bleeding through the walls. Patients eyed me with a mix of pity and morbid curiosity as I walked through the hall. I needed a break from the staring and the rumors. I found myself in the staff room with Rosa, the receptionist, who was always blunt as a spoon. She was digging through her locker, the metal door screeching like nails on a chalkboard. So, he left you the papers then disappeared, huh? Rosa didn't mince her words. That's about the size of it, I muttered, pouring myself a coffee. She leaned against the lockers, arching an eyebrow. You sign M? Yeah. Savage. Rosa shook her head. Man's got style, give him that. I couldn't help but laugh, leave it to Rosa to call a disappearing act stylish. Back in my office, the nice and tidy one with diplomas on the wall, the phone rang again. It was the one face I didn't mind showing up in my caller ID, Angela, the closest thing I'd had to a sister since forever. Girl, how you just gonna let him punk you like that? No hello, no how are you, just Angela in all her glory. He didn't punk me, Ange. I signed the papers, that was my choice. And you just gonna roll over and play dead? There's nothing to fight for. I'm done and dusted with him. There was a pause, I knew Angela's wheels were turning. Fine, she said. But this isn't gonna fly. We're going out tonight. You need to blow off some steam, or you'll go nuts. I wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. Besides, it beat listening to the whispers and rumors that looped like a bad soundtrack in my mind. The hours ticked by, filled with teeth cleaning and dodging personal questions. By the time my last patient left, I was ready to peel out of there like a bat out of hell. Angela was waiting for me at the local dive, the kind of place where the beer was cold, and no one gave two hoots about your personal drama. I walked in and spotted her straight away, waving enthusiastically. What's kicking, chicken? She greeted me, sliding over a glass of something strong. Hey, Ange. Just the usual circus. I gulped down the drink, welcoming the burn. We talked, or rather, she talked, and I tried to forget. It worked, mostly. The clink of glasses and Angela's hearty laughter were a good combo. It was late when we said our goodbyes, just outside the bar. The night was dark, the wind was cold, and once inside my car, I realized something. I felt lighter. Like dropping off a heavy suitcase I'd been lugging around. The years had rolled by like series of silent movie frames. That old bitterness about Mark, it was more or less a faint echo these days. I mean, life had to move on, right? I shifted gears somewhere along the line, and now things were steady. You could say I was living the quiet life, except for the occasional siren wail, thanks to my new husband, Tom, the cop. Tom was good people. A chuckle in a uniform, you might say. He had this knack, for turning a crappy day around with just a smirk and a joke that was so bad it circled back to being good. Then there was Joey, our little typhoon in toddler form. 3 years old and already the boss of the household. If joy came in human form, it was him, no contest. One pretty normal Tuesday, I was in the kitchen, fighting with the wrapper of a macaroni box. That's when Tom ambled in, his uniform looking like it had seen better days. He planted a kiss on my cheek, still sparking a little zing even after all these years, and ruffled Joey's hair. "Hey, bud, how was your day with Mom?" he asked Joey, who was smashing a toy truck into the linoleum. Joey's answer was a happy shriek and more enthusiastic truck smashing. "I'm starting to think he's going to follow in your footsteps," I said, finally getting the box open and emptying it into the simmering water. Tom's beeper suddenly blared, ruining the moment. He checked it and grimaced. "Looks like the station needs me. Some brawl at the bar downtown." "Geez, Tom. Stay safe, will you?" "Always," he said, standing up but with Joey still clinging to him. He handed our son back to me. "Gotta run. I'll try not to wake you too when I come back." After he left, it was just Joey and me and the hum of the refrigerator. Joey babbled something about dada, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge in my chest. Sure, I had Tom and Joey, a solid job, a roof over my head. But sometimes, when Tom's cruiser pulled out of the driveway, or when Joey's laughter filled a room, I'd remember I once had a different life, a different partner in the dance. "Come on, champ," I told Joey. "Let's tackle that mountain of blocks like we're the king and queen of the castle." And as I built flimsy towers for Joey to knock over, laughing all the while, I realized I'd turned over more than just a new leaf. I'd started a whole new chapter. And you know what? It looked pretty damn good from where I was sitting. As the flat screen on the wall spat out images with quiet contempt, there was Mark, my ex, hunched over on a patch of green. The grass was probably crumpled under him, matching his wrinkled linen shirt. I hadn't seen him in years, not since he traded our life for silence and dirt paths. Those journalists were eyeing him like he was a prize pig at the fair, each waiting for their turn. Mark fiddled with strands of his wild beard as he leaned into the microphone. His voice, still with that calm know-it-all tone, itched in my ears. "Yeah, that's right," he was saying. "I had to leave because of her. She's got this heart, steeled over, cold. And cheating? She was a regular at that game. Took my piece, she did. That's why you find me here, away from all that mess." The air in the dental clinic was colder than usual, or maybe it was just my mood darkening everything around me since that darned news report aired. I slammed my locker shut, trying to shove away the clutter of whispers and side glances that had infested the office like bad breath. It wasn't just the sterile smell of mint and disinfectant lingering, it was the stench of gossip. Thanks to my ex, Mark, I was the new plaque everyone wanted to scrape off. "Hey, you done early?" Gina, one of the hygienists, leaned against the door frame, balancing a stack of patient folders. Her tone was casual, but her eyes were skirting around mine, wary. Too wary. "Yeah," I grunted, collecting my stuff. "Need to clear my head. This place is looking kinda stuffy." She snorted, a crude sound that was music to my irritated ears. "Looks the same to me. Though, you could cut the tension with dental floss." I offered a half smile, but didn't meet her eyes. "Maybe some people got cavities in their personalities," I replied, voice tight. As I walked out, I couldn't shake off the prying eyes. Reaching my car, I spotted Tom waiting for me, arms crossed, leant on the hood. His usual sunny exterior was clouded over. "How's it going, Jenny?" he asked as I approached, trying to light up the dimming day. "Like a root canal gone wrong," I replied, my keys jingled with a shake of my hand. Tom pushed himself off the car. "You know what I think? Screw him. He's talking crap." "That's one word for it," I said, opening the car door. Tom detoured it, his stance stubborn. We shouldn't let this nonsense get between us. You've got me, Joey, and Angela. It's their problem if they believe that liar." The sincerity in his voice was a soothing balm, but I was too riled up to take it in fully. "Sure, but try telling that to the hyena club in there." He grabbed my hand, his grip firm. "Listen, let's grab Joey, hit the pizza place, and just chill. All right?" I took a breath, absorbing the offer. "You always know how to patch things up, cop hubby," I said with a tired smile. "And don't forget it." He flashed a grin, the kind that could make a dentist proud. But before we could continue, a call cut through our bubble. "Mommy." Joey came sprinting across the parking lot, his babysitter trailing behind. The little guy wrapped around my legs, a toddler tornado. "Hey champ," I said, lifting him up. "You ready for some pizza?" "Pizza, pizza," Joey chanted, any worry about the day's drama lost in his innocent cheer. I glanced back at the clinic once Joey and Tom were settled in the car, a cold laugh escaping me. To hell with them. Let's go have some real family time. Tom revved the engine, a mischievous spark lighting his eyes. "No looking back, babe, that's the rule." "Got it, boss," I said, and as we drove off, Joey's giggles, the only sound I cared about, I felt the heaviness shed bit by bit. It was just another crappy chapter in the novel of life, one that I'd darn well write myself. No ex-husband was going to taint my reflection, not anymore. I was still reeling from another day's work when she cornered me. Jasmine, the new intern, was kind of edgy since the day she stumbled in, but today, she was all jittery. So there I was, peeling off my gloves, and she comes up real close, smelling like antiseptic and fear. "Doc, I gotta talk to you," Jasmine said, her voice as shaky as a beaten-up washing machine. "What's up?" I was already thinking about the pile of paperwork waiting to claw at my evening. "It's about Mark. I heard the other nurses saying you were married to that guy." Her eyes darted around the room as if afraid the walls would grow ears. "Yeah, what about him?" I tossed the gloves and reached for my coffee, gone cold hours ago. "I was a student when he was teaching. He wasn't just giving lectures, if you know what I mean." Her voice took a dive, like someone had yanked the volume down. "He did stuff. Bad stuff." I felt something raw and bitter twist in my gut. "Stuff?" I asked, hoping for some vague rumor I could dismiss. He was handsy, you know, with me. And with others. We were just a bunch of scared kids, and he liked that power. Jasmine spat the words out like they were poison. My grip on the mug tightened. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I saw him on TV, acting all holy and repentant. I couldn't stomach it. I threatened to expose him, and then he vanished." "That coward," I hissed. The mug in my hand cracked, coffee seeping through the spiderweb crevices to drip onto the floor. "He told everyone he left 'cause of you and some grand spiritual quest. But that's bull. He fled 'cause I had proof of what he did. The texts, the creepy late-night calls." "That's a big claim, Jasmine," I managed to say, my throat dry as sawdust. "You got any of that proof on you?" "Yep," she said, a grim satisfaction in her tone. She hauled out her phone, a cheap thing with a cracked screen, and flicked through messages until she shoved it under my nose. There it was, in black and white. A whole sordid history laid out in texts and emails. I read, every word a punch in the gut. When I was done, I looked up. "I'm sorry, for what it's worth. Thank you for coming forward." "We gonna do something about it?" she asked, tough as nails now. "Absolutely," I said, feeling a flame of anger kindling inside me. And as we plotted revenge on the man I once called a husband, the man who had fooled us all, I felt a grim kind of satisfaction. This was going to be messy, but hell, it was about time some dirt got cleaned up around here. I stood there in the clearing, staring at the man I once called my husband. There he was, Professor Mark, looking every bit the wilderness prophet with a graying beard and a flock of adoring followers. His eyes flashed over me, a brief flash of recognition before his face settled into that infuriating calm. "Jenny? What the hell are you doing here?" His voice had that familiar sharp edge. "Just wanted a chat, Mark. A cozy catch-up between exes. Never thought I'd find you playing guru," I said, squinting at the half-naked followers prancing around. He crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" I cut to the chase. "That trash talk on TV, really, Mark? Cruel and unfaithful. You sure have a way with fiction." He shrugged, the same old nonchalant shrug that drove me up the wall. "Needed a story, didn't I? Playing the victim pays the bills." I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and sharp. "And here I thought you ran off to find inner peace." His audience looked on, starving for some drama. He was unfazed. "Gotta give the people what they want." "Yeah, but at my expense?" I felt that familiar anger bubbling. "And there's another thing, about Jasmine." His face lost color for a second, but then he barked out a laugh. "Jasmine? That kid had nothing on me." His nerve was something else. Without breaking eye contact, I slid out my phone. "Actually, she did." He squinted at the screen as I flicked through the messages Jasmine had sent me. Threats, creepy come-ons, the whole 9 yards. Mark tried to grab the phone out of my hands, but then Tom appeared next to me. The message of protection couldn't have been clearer if he was wearing a flashing sign. It made me feel safe and furious all at once that I needed it. "Look, everyone," Mark's voice broke through the silence, all smooth and soothing like one of those late-night radio hosts. "This is all a big misunderstanding, all right? My ex here, she's got it in for me, that's all this is." I could feel my jaw clench at his words, but I kept my cool. I wasn't about to let him get to me. Not this time. Tom's voice, gravel mixed with thunder, growled next to me. "Cut the crap, Mark. We all know what you did. And it's all coming out today." Mark's followers looked from him to me and back again, like they were watching a tennis match. Just then, the wail of the sirens cut through Mark's phony serenity like a chainsaw through butter. His face drained of color, which on him, looked almost impressive. "Please." Mark was kneeling now, the guru luster gone, replaced by sweaty desperation. "You can't do this. Think of my reputation." Tom snorted, stepping closer to Mark so that the kneeling man had to crane his neck just to keep eye contact. "Reputation? What about the lies about Jenny? What about all those messages, huh? What about Jasmine's story? You think that doesn't count for nothing? The game's up, buddy." Mark looked up at us, his eyes flicking from my snarl to Tom's stony glare, and then to the uniformed officers coming up behind us. There was a moment, a single moment, where he looked like he might run. But Mark didn't run. He just sat there on his knees, looking up. Looking like he knew that the tides had indeed turned. The followers were mumbling among themselves now, backing away from their fallen idol, their murmurs building like waves before a storm. Then, one of the cops stepped forward, flipping open a notebook. "Are you Professor Mark Thompson?" he asked, his tone neutral. Mark just nodded, his voice squeaking like a rusty hinge. "Yes, sir." The officer glanced at me, then at Tom. "We're going to need to take him in," he said, as if asking for permission. Tom just gave a short nod, and I felt my heart kick up a notch. This was it. Mark shot one last desperate look at his disciples. "I'm being set up," he yelled, hoping for sympathy, salvation. But seeing the truth staring back at him from the scattered glances of the crowd was the nail in the coffin of any sympathy he hoped for. The cop cuffed him with all the flair of someone clocking in for a routine shift. "Mark Thompson, you are under arrest." The clink of the cuffs was like the sweetest music, and that's when I knew, for sure. The tides hadn't just turned, they'd flipped, completely. Tom wrapped his arm around me as we watched Mark being led away. The scene felt almost surreal. I turned to Tom, and his nod told me everything. We were on the same team, and we were strong. I was standing outside and breathing in the fresh air. The phone in my pocket started its own dance, buzzing with incoming calls, no doubt apologies and awkward backtracking. I had no interest in their sorry words, I told you so wasn't my style. The door to the clinic swung open, and Jasmine walked out. "Hey, Doc," she said, with a grin that seemed out of place, but right for someone who'd just shrugged off a weight they'd been dragging around. "Is it true? They got him?" "Yep," I said, feeling a sharp sense of satisfaction at her smile. "It's true." "Good. It's about damn time," she said, her voice firm. I could hear some of my own resolve echoed in her tone. Jasmine had courage, coming forward, speaking out. "It's not easy, facing ghosts." "He won't be seeing the outside of a jail cell for a long while," Tom said. "Good riddance," she shot back, no hint of sympathy for my ex-husband. I couldn't help smiling at her spunk. "You did good," I said. "Really good." Tom's radio crackled with police chatter, but he ignored it, his attention on today's victory. "You gonna celebrate?" Jasmine asked. Her shift was obviously over, and she was all but bouncing on her heels, ready to let relief transition into something warmer, more joyful. "Mom's got Joey," I answered. "So, yeah, we'll celebrate." Quietly. Jasmine nodded, then left, her steps light. "Let's go home, Tom," I said after a moment. "Let's go be with our son." "Nothing I'd rather do," he agreed, and we turned away, my hand finding his, strength in our combined grip, ready to face whatever came next, together.
Life was mostly predictable for me, Sarah, a 30-year-old fiercely climbing the corporate ladder. From my college days to the boardroom meetings, I had it all planned out. But the plot twist in my well-structured life script? Marrying Alex and forming an unexpected alliance with his mother, Linda. Alex and I met in the least romantic of places, the university library. I was buried in finance books, he was wrestling with computer science. Our eyes met over a pile of textbooks, and the rest, as they say, is history. We were two college kids, juggling classes and dreams, but together, we were invincible. Alex was the calm to my storm, the laughter to my seriousness. Our friend Brian, a pal from college days, played a big part in our lives too. He was the one who vouched for Alex, getting him a job as an IT guy at his firm. Brian and his wife, Rachel, were like the couple version of that cozy, familiar cafe you love, always welcoming, always a good time. Then came Linda, Alex's mom. I'd heard the horror stories, the meddling, the judging. But Linda? She was different. Warmth radiated from her like the sun on a chilly morning. She welcomed me not just into her family but into her heart. "Sarah, you're exactly what Alex needs. A strong, smart woman. He's a lucky man," Linda would say, her eyes twinkling with sincerity. And somehow, her words made me feel not just accepted, but cherished. Our relationship was a dance of mutual respect and affection. Even on my busiest days, I'd make time to call her, just to check in. "Hey, Linda, it's Sarah. How are you holding up?" "Oh, dear, just the usual. But tell me, how's work?" "Don't let them overwork you," Linda would reply, her voice always laced with concern. We'd chat about everything and nothing, from her legendary apple pie recipe to the latest office politics. Linda wasn't just my mother-in-law, she was a confidant, a friend. We were a trio bound by love, but even the strongest bonds can fray under the weight of unspoken truths and unmet expectations. And as the days rolled into nights, the cracks began to widen, setting the stage for a storm that was silently brewing on the horizon. The glow of my career cast a shadow over my personal life. With each promotion and business trip, the distance between Alex and me grew. Our home, once a sanctuary, started to feel more like a hotel for me, a place to crash between flights. One evening, I returned from a grueling 2-week trip. The house greeted me with a cold silence and a mess that seemed to scream neglect. Pizza boxes piled up like a monument to Alex's apathy, and the laundry basket overflowed, a testament to the widening gap in our relationship. "Alex, this is ridiculous. It looks like a dump here," I snapped, my frustration boiling over as I surveyed the chaos. He looked up from his computer, his eyes barely registering my presence. "Hey, Sarah. Chill. Yeah, it's just a bit of mess. No big deal." No big deal? I work my butt off, and you can't even manage to keep the house clean? Is that asking too much? My voice was sharp, the words slicing through the tense air. He shrugged, a dismissive gesture that fueled my anger. "You know I'm not Mr. Clean. Why fuss about it?" "Why?" "Because I live here too, Alex. Because we're supposed to be a team." The words tumbled out, raw and unfiltered. The conversation, if you could call it that, ended with cold silence. Our home felt more like a battleground, our conversations reduced to terse exchanges and resentful glances. The next day, Linda called. Her voice, usually so warm and comforting, carried a note of concern that made my heart sink. "Sarah, dear, is everything all right? You sounded off yesterday." I sighed, the weight of the unspoken truths heavy on my chest. It's been tough, Linda. The house, Alex, everything seems to be falling apart." Linda was silent for a moment, then spoke with a firmness that was rare for her. "Sarah, you're doing your best. But Alex needs to step up. You can't carry the load alone." Her words were a balm, a reminder that I wasn't in this turmoil alone. But they were also a stark reminder of the growing rift between Alex and me. That night, as I lay in bed, the moonlight casting a soft glow in the room, I couldn't shake the feeling of disquiet. The once comforting silence now felt oppressive, filled with the echoes of our failing relationship. "Alex, we need to talk. This can't go on," I whispered into the darkness. He turned to face me, his face a mask of indifference. "What's there to talk about, Sarah? It's just a bit of mess, not the end of the world." "But it's not just the mess, Alex. It's us. We're drifting apart, and if we don't do something, I'm afraid we'll end up strangers living under the same roof." He didn't respond, the silence between us growing louder than any words could. In that moment, I realized that the cracks weren't just beginning to show, they were widening, threatening to split the very foundation of our marriage. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were supposed to be filled with the warmth of family and the joy of togetherness. However, life had other plans. Linda was hospitalized due to an exacerbation of her chronic illness. The hospital's sterile, impersonal halls were a stark contrast to the festive atmosphere we had hoped for. Sitting by her hospital bed, I held her hand, her usual warmth diminished by the cold touch of 4 needles. "Linda, you won't spend Thanksgiving here. I'll pick you up and we'll celebrate at home, just like we always do," I assured her, squeezing her hand gently. She smiled weakly, a shadow of her usual vibrant self. "Thank you, dear. But what about your work? You're always so busy," she murmured, concern for me outweighing her own discomfort. "Don't worry about that, Linda. You're more important," I replied, though the weight of my responsibilities loomed large in my mind. However, just as I was ready to put work aside for family, my boss dropped a bombshell. He called me into his office, his expression grim. "Sarah, we need you on an urgent business trip. It's critical, and I wouldn't ask if it weren't absolutely necessary." I felt torn, caught between my commitment to my family and my duties at work. "But sir, it's Thanksgiving, and my mother-in-law is in the hospital. I promised her I'd be there," I explained, hoping for some understanding. He sighed, his gaze fixed on some unseen dill. "Sarah. I understand your predicament, Sarah, but this is a matter of great importance. We're counting on you." The weight of my professional life was a burden I was accustomed to carrying, but it had never before felt so heavy. With a heavy heart, I turned to the one person I thought I could rely on. Alex, I have to go on this trip. It's urgent. Can you please make sure your mom is taken care of? Pick her up from the hospital on Thanksgiving Day. She shouldn't be alone on the holiday, I pleaded, the worry evident in my voice. Alex, who had been more distant lately, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He nodded, a glimmer of the man I once knew shining through. Of course, Sarah. I'll take care of Mom. You don't have to worry about a thing, he assured me, his voice steady and reassuring. Reluctantly, I packed my bags, my mind a chaotic mix of client meetings and concern for Linda. As I left, I glanced back at our home, a place that once represented comfort and love, now a symbol of the sacrifices and choices that define our lives. On the trip, amidst the endless meetings and business strategies, my thoughts constantly drifted back to Linda and Alex. I found myself checking my phone incessantly, hoping for an update, a sign that everything was as it should be. But it was the silence that spoke volumes, the absence of messages or calls that painted a picture far from the reassuring promises made. As the critical hours ticked away, the unease in my heart grew, a foreboding sense that this Thanksgiving was going to be unlike any other we had ever experienced. The silence of my phone was deafening, each missed call to Alex a growing echo of my anxiety. The business trip, usually a whirlwind of meetings and networking, felt like a slow crawl, each moment stretching out with worry for Linda and frustration towards Alex. I tried calling again, the phone ringing hopelessly into the void. Come on, Alex, pick up. I muttered under my breath, the bustling airport around me fading into a blur. The call went to voicemail, again. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios, each more troubling than the last. In desperation, I dialed Linda's number, half expecting the same cold silence. But after a few rings, her frail voice came through, weak and tinged with sadness. Linda, it's Sarah. I've been trying to reach Alex. How are you? Is everything set for Thanksgiving? My words tumbled out, a mix of hope and dread. Oh, Sarah. Linda's voice broke, a soft sob cutting through. I'm still at the hospital. Alex, he didn't come. My heart sank, a heavy weight of betrayal and worry settling in. What? But he promised. He said he'd be there for you. The words felt hollow, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions inside me. I know, dear. I waited, but Linda's voice trailed off, the hurt unmistakable. Anger and concern battled within me. How could Alex do this? How could he leave his own mother alone in the hospital, especially on Thanksgiving? I knew I had to act, and fast. Linda, I'm so sorry. I'm coming back right now. I'll sort this out, I promise. With a shaky hand, I dialed my boss, the urgency in my voice cutting through the formalities. Sir, I need to go back. It's an emergency. My family needs me. I'm sorry, but I can't stay. To my relief, he understood. Go, Sarah. Family is important. We'll manage here. The relief was short-lived, replaced by a sense of urgency. I rushed through the airport, each step fueled by a mix of worry for Linda and a growing anger towards Alex. As the plane took off, my mind raced with unanswered questions. Why didn't Alex pick up Linda? Where was he? And most importantly, what would I find when I got back? The flight felt like an eternity, each mile home a mix of dread and determination. I was going back, not just to salvage the remains of Thanksgiving, but to confront the unsettling truths that lay hidden behind Alex's unanswered calls. After the draining flight and the tense drive, the world seemed to slow down as Linda and I approached her house. I managed to pick her up from the hospital. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, loaded with unspoken truths waiting to burst forth. I glanced at Linda, her face etched with the pain of her son's betrayal. Her silent tears were a sharp reminder of the reality we were about to face. I reached for her hand, offering a silent promise of support, no matter what lay behind the closed door of her home. Pulling into the driveway, I hesitated for a moment before picking up my phone. It was time to confront Alex, to demand the truth that had been so carelessly twisted. I dialed his number, my heart pounding against my chest. After a few rings, Alex's voice came through, casual, unaware of the storm that was about to hit. "Hey, Sarah. What's up? Alex, where are you? And where's your mom?" My voice was steady, each word a carefully laid trap. There was a brief pause, and then, "Oh, Mom's right here. We're at her place, getting things ready for Thanksgiving, just like we planned." The lie was so blatant, so hurtful, that for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Linda, sitting beside me, let out a soft whimper, her heartbreak audible in the cramped space of the car. I ended the call and turned to Linda, her face a portrait of a mother's heart shattered by her own son's lies. "We're going to get to the bottom of this," I assured her, though my voice trembled with my own swirling emotions. Linda nodded, a silent warrior bracing for the battle ahead. We got out of the car and walked up to the front door. The familiarity of the place, once a symbol of family gatherings and joyous celebrations, now felt tainted, corrupted by the web of lies spun within its walls. Linda, with a hand that trembled ever so slightly, unlocked the door. We stepped inside, the dimly lit hallway leading us towards the faint sounds of conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the somber mood that clung to us like a second skin. As we moved quietly towards the living room, the reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. There, in a scene that seemed surreal in its normalcy, was Alex, sitting cozily next to Rachel, Brian's wife. The laughter, the intimacy of their posture, spoke volumes of the betrayal that had been hiding in plain sight. For a moment, time stood still. The air was thick with tension, the silence a stark prelude to the storm of emotions about to be unleashed. Linda's presence beside me was both a source of strength and a poignant reminder of the pain inflicted not just on a wife, but on a mother. The silence in the room was deafening, the air thick with the tension of a moment that none of us could have imagined. Alex and Rachel, caught in the act, looked like deer in headlights, their guilt written all over their faces. "What the hell is this, Alex?" My voice was a mix of rage and disbelief, my words cutting through the silence like a knife. Alex stuttered, his usual laid-back demeanor shattered by the gravity of the situation. "Sarah, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." "Explain? Explain how you could do this to your own mother? To me?" I shot back, the fury in my voice making my hands tremble. Linda stood silently, her eyes fixed on her son, the pain and betrayal in her gaze more piercing than any words could ever be. Rachel, her face pale and tear-streaked, finally found her voice. "Sarah, please, don't tell Brian. This was a mistake. A terrible mistake." "Mistake? You call this a mistake?" I couldn't contain the bitterness in my voice. "You both made choices, selfish, hurtful choices. And now, you want to sweep it all under the rug like it's nothing?" Alex tried to speak, to salvage what little he could from the wreckage of lies. "Sarah, please, let's talk about this. We can fix it." "Fix it? How, Alex?" "By pretending that your affair, your betrayal of everything we stood for, never happened?" The room felt smaller, the walls closing in with the weight of the truth now laid bare. Linda, who had been a silent witness to the unfolding drama, finally spoke, her voice a soft yet formidable force. "Alex, how could you? After everything, how could you do this to your family?" Alex's gaze dropped, unable to meet the eyes of the two women he had hurt the most. The room was filled with the sound of broken hearts and shattered trust, the aftermath of choices that could never be undone. Rachel, her composure crumbling, pleaded through her tears. "It was a mistake. I never meant to hurt anyone." "Mistakes are forgetting to pick up milk, Rachel, not having an affair with your friend's husband," I snapped, the rawness of my emotions leaving no room for sympathy. The confrontation was a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and disbelief, a storm that left no one untouched. Each word spoken was like a piece of the life we had known, falling away to reveal the harsh reality beneath. In the wake of the turmoil, the world seemed to stand still, the rhythm of life disrupted by the discordant notes of betrayal and loss. Linda and I found ourselves adrift in a sea of uncertainty, clinging to the fragile raft of our shared pain. The living room, once a hub of laughter and warmth, now felt like an echo chamber of our shattered dreams. Linda and I sat, a silent understanding between us, the weight of recent revelations heavy in the air. "Sarah, I just can't fathom it, how Alex could do this. And Brian, poor Brian." Linda's voice trailed off, the edges of her words frayed with sorrow and disbelief. I nodded, my heart heavy. "I know, Linda. It's like we've been living in a parallel universe, and now we've been thrust back into a harsh reality." The silence that followed was laden with unspoken thoughts and fears. The future, once a canvas of shared dreams and plans, now loomed before us, daunting and undefined. "Sarah, what are you going to do now?" Linda's question, soft and tentative, broke the stillness. I sighed, the weight of decision heavy on my shoulders. "I've been thinking about that a lot. Divorce seems like the only path forward. I can't. I won't stay tethered to a lie." Linda reached out, her hand a warm presence in the chill of our disillusionment. "I support you, whatever you decide. You're strong, Sarah. Stronger than you know." Her words were a balm to my weary soul, a reminder that even in the darkest times, we are never truly alone. The days that followed were a blur of activity, a flurry of paperwork and decisions that seemed to strip the color from the world. The word divorce echoed in the empty spaces of our home, a stark reminder of all that had been lost. Alex's attempts at reconciliation fell on deaf ears. His presence, once a source of comfort and joy, was now a specter of betrayal, a ghost haunting the corridors of my heart. "Sarah, please. Can we not try to work through this?" "I'm sorry, more sorry than you can imagine," Alex pleaded, his words a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm his actions had created. "Sorry doesn't undo what you did, Alex. It doesn't erase the pain, the lies. I need to find my way forward, and I can't do that with you," I replied, my voice a steady anchor in the storm of my emotions. The revelation of Alex and Rachel's affair sent shockwaves through our lives, but the fallout didn't end there. Brian, who had been a friend and ally, was blindsided by the betrayal. His decision was swift and final. Alex lost not only his wife but his job as well, the consequences of his actions leaving him isolated and exposed. Rachel, too, faced the harsh aftermath as Brian filed for divorce, the trust in their marriage irreparably broken. The garden was serene, a tranquil oasis where Linda and I sat, surrounded by the vivid tapestry of autumn. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of change, a reminder that even in life's coldest moments, warmth and beauty could still be found. Linda broke the silence, her voice thoughtful. "You know, Sarah, life never stops surprising us. Just when we think we have it all figured out, it turns everything upside down." I smiled, feeling the truth in her words. "It sure does. But somehow, it's in these upside-down moments that we really find our strength, don't you think?" She nodded, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of experiences lived and lessons learned. "Absolutely. Strength and maybe a bit of stubbornness too." Our laughter mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves, a symphony of resilience and renewed spirit. The conversation drifted, touching on memories, dreams, and the open road ahead. "I've been giving it a lot of thought," I began, the idea that had been simmering in my mind now ready to be shared. "I think it's time for a new chapter, Linda. A new place, new faces, a new start." Linda's eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and understanding. "A new place? That's a big step. But if anyone can make it work, it's you, Sarah. What's on your mind?" "Somewhere far from here. A place where the past doesn't linger around every corner. I want to rediscover myself, outside the shadows of what's happened," I said, the words painting a picture of hope and liberation. Linda reached for my hand, her touch a warm anchor in the sea of uncertainty. "You'll always have a place here, Sarah. No distance can change that. And remember, I'm just a phone call away, day or night. I squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words. I know, Linda. And that means the world to me. But I feel like this is something I need to do. To prove to myself that I can start over, that I can build something new from the ground up. We all need that sometimes, a fresh start, Linda mused, her gaze following the flight of a lone bird across the sky. And while you're out there, building your new life, never forget how strong you are, Sarah. You've weathered a storm many couldn't, and you've come out stronger on the other side. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The garden, a riot of colors and life, stood as a testament to new beginnings and the resilience of nature. As the day faded into evening, the garden became a silhouette against the twilight sky. Linda and I sat in comfortable silence, two souls connected by shared experiences and an unbreakable bond. With Linda's support in my heart and the lessons of the past in my mind, I stepped into the new chapter, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The journey wasn't about forgetting or leaving behind, it was about moving forward, carrying the wisdom of experience as a beacon in the journey towards a new horizon.